Thompson.
Here.
Okay, is there any public comment? Started?
Any public?
Okay, Public Works?
Thank you. Is this thing on? I have to find the right place to put it because I'm short and I have a giant binder. Okay, good evening. My name is Chris Bailey, and I'm the Public Works Operations Director. Jeff Blade and I are going to be presenting the Public Works Department budget request. Public Works has both an engineering and an operations department, which are administrated separately but work together in terms of funding and assignment of activities. As I said, I'm the operations director, and I'm responsible for the operation and maintenance programs related to water, wastewater, stormwater, street transit, and the airport, along with several internal service funds. And Jeff is going to introduce himself.
So as Chris said, I'm Jeff Blaine. I'm the Public Works Engineering and Community Development Director, so I'll be participating in this presentation and then giving the one that immediately follows. In engineering, we're responsible for design and construction of capital projects, development review, assistance on regulatory issues, long-range planning, utility billing, and administrative services for both the Public Works and Community Development Department.
And then behind us, in the checkered shirt, we have Jeff Babbitt. He's the Public Works and Community Development Business Manager, so he's the accountant for the Public Works Department, and he will help us when we go astray. On the dais tonight, you should have a copy of our PowerPoint slides that I just handed out. The slide presentation is almost the same as it's been the past several years, so I'm going to be going through it fairly quickly. And then we have all of the detailed budget pages that we'll be going through. But if you have any questions on the PowerPoint slides, please stop and ask. As in previous years, we want to express our thanks and gratitude for all the work that the Public Works team provided in putting the budget request together. Many of them are seated in the back. They do the bulk of the work in developing all of these program budgets, and will also be available if we have specific questions about their programs. This proposed budget does not have any major organizational changes nor any large financial changes from the current year budget. We have a total proposed budget of $117.2 million. Public Works has several separate and distinct funds, each of which has within it multiple programs. There are over 100 pages of Public Works budget sheets. So we're going to provide a quick overview of the department via the slideshow and some changes proposed in this year's budget before we get into the sheets in more detail. So the Public Works Department has a wide range of responsibilities for the city's infrastructure. These are broken down into 4 categories: transportation, wastewater, drinking water, and stormwater. Through our activities, Public Works supports all 4 strategic plan themes. In short, Public Works touches every resident's life in some way every day. The total number of proposed positions in the Public Works for next fiscal year is 124.43 FTE. This is an increase of 2 FTE over the current budget, and there will be one other position change. We'll discuss all of these in more detail a little bit later. Our personnel are divided into 2 departments, engineering and operations. Engineering and utility billing has 29 FTE, and there are 9 FTE in administrative services. The administrative section provides support to Public Works engineering and operations, as well as community development. Jeff supervises those divisions. In operations, we have 86.43 FTE proposed for next year, which work across all of our utilities as well as several internal service programs. Our departments work across several separate funds, which is one reason for the length and complexity of the Public Works budget. The total Public Works budget of $117.2 million is a 19.4% increase over the current year budget. It does not mean that we plan to spend that much or that rate revenue will be increasing that much. Many things go into the total budget number, including reserves that are carried over from year to year and not spent, and revenues from outside sources such as the state and federal government that covers construction costs such as street projects, et cetera. All of those things are included in the total budget amount, but it does not mean we're actually going to spend $117.2 million every year, but they have to be included in the budget because they exist. If you have questions on that, let me know.
Actually, the only question is, could you make that more clear for anyone who might not have done this before? What percentage, and it's $117 million, but what amount do we normally spend?
Let's see.
It's going to be closer to around just over $100 million. So we have a $13 million loan for the riverfront interceptor. That's a big portion of that. If you took that out, we're about 6% increase from last year.
But the $100 million is actually what we spend,
$100 million
not
is
just what is
typical.
authorized.
No, $100 million is typical budget. I don't have their numbers for you. Jeff, you know off the top of your head what's spent versus carried?
Probably closer to 85 or 90 million,
Yeah.
with reserves and debt service,
Yeah.
capital projects.
Thank you.
That was, he said 85 to 90, just since you didn't have a mic.
He has a mic.
We didn't use it.
Okay, so as Jeff mentioned, part of the increase in this upcoming fiscal year is a $13 million loan that we recently received permission or approval for the Riverfront Interceptor project, which has been a significant need in the sewer program for several years. We'll discuss that in detail when we get to that program. But if you took that $13 million out, then the total budget is up about 6% from the current year. The budget is prepared conservatively. It's based only on inflationary utility rate increases that we recently reviewed with the City Council. Those include a 3.5% increase for sewer, a 5% increase for water, and a 5% increase for stormwater that will take effect in the next fiscal year. Our emphasis continues to be defining efficiencies in the department to allow us to continue to provide services but keep rates as low as possible. I also want to emphasize that with very few exceptions, Public Works does not receive any funding from the general fund. This is a common misunderstanding I'm sure the Budget Committee is aware of, but many people in the community do not understand that. The only contribution from the general fund that goes to Public Works programs is a portion of the city's state shared revenue that is directed to the transit programs and provides local match for the federal transit grants.
Do you count IT equipment and other things as part of the city's contribution to Public Works?
No, the Public Works pays for its own.
Okay.
We are told by the IT department how much we need to pay each year for their services, et
They're
cetera.
excellent services.
Which we do have an excellent IT department. But those are budgeted individually in programs, so as part of our total need for rate revenue, that's factored into each program.
Thank you.
So overview of our programs, we'll start with transportation. The city's transportation network includes the street system and all associated infrastructure. Albany has almost 200 miles of improved streets and all of the assets that go with those. 23 traffic signals, over 7,000 signs, and 61 miles of striping, all of which has to be maintained, improved, replaced, and rebuilt over time. Engineering provides design and construction services and long-range planning activities for our transportation system. Transportation also includes the Albany Municipal Airport and the 3 public transit programs, which are Albany Transit, Coloride Program, and the Lynn Benton Loop. Funding for transportation programs comes from a variety of sources depending on the program. We have those listed here on the slide. There are local, state, and federal sources, as well as revenue generated by the programs themselves in the case of the airport and transit program. Albany Transit and Paratransit programs will receive $600,000 in state shared revenue from the general fund, as shown here. That's the only general fund contribution that Public Works receives. In the wastewater division, we provide wastewater conveyance through over 200 miles of sewer mains and 11 lift stations. Treatment takes place at the Water Reclamation Facility and at Talking Water Gardens. Within the sewer fund, we also provide services for response to environmental concerns such as leaking underground storage tanks, and we provide federally required permitting for significant industrial users within the city, and we perform a significant portion of the maintenance of the stormwater system with our wastewater staff. Engineering provides design and construction services for sewer system repairs, long-range utility planning, and assistance with regulatory compliance. Funding for wastewater programs is primarily through rate revenue and SDCs, as well as payments received from the City of Millersburg and ATI Wachang for the treatment of their wastewater. The drinking water program includes the Santiam Albany Canal, the distribution system including 7 reservoirs, and water treatment at 2 treatment facilities. Engineering provides design and construction services, again, for water pipe replacement projects, capital maintenance at the reservoirs and treatment plants, and management of long-range planning and regulatory services. Funding sources for water, again, are primarily rates and system development charges, with additional amounts from the cities of Lebanon and Millersburg. The funds from the City of Lebanon are payments outlined under the terms of the 2 canal intergovernmental agreements we have with Lebanon. Millersburg pays for their fair share of operating costs for the Albany Millersburg treatment plant. The stormwater system includes about 135 miles of pipe and 70 miles of ditches, thousands of manholes, catch basins and inlets, and over 100 stormwater quality facilities. In addition to maintenance, Public Works provides response to spills that may enter the storm system, sampling of stormwater for contaminants, and engineering design and inspection services for stormwater infrastructure. Fiscal year 18-19 will be the second full fiscal year with dedicated funding source for stormwater. The stormwater fee went into effect March 1st of 2017, and it was designed to approximately fund historic levels of maintenance activity in the stormwater system. This dedicated funding will significantly improve the transparency of the stormwater revenues and expenditures, but it's also insufficient to meet the needs throughout the entire system. Public Works also has a handful of internal service programs within the department which charge back to the separate utilities. These include utility billing, water quality control, instrumentation and control, facilities maintenance, the engineering services, and administration programs. These programs are supported by charging back the actual cost of their services to the programs that they're supporting. Again, the proposed budget for fiscal year 18-19 has no major financial changes from the current year budget. This budget was built assuming the inflationary rate increases I mentioned previously. And we are requesting 2 additional FTE, 1 in engineering and 1 in operations. And there's 1 personnel change in operations that I'll describe. The personnel changes in street maintenance, we're requesting 1 additional street maintenance 2 position. This work group has consistently relied on help from temporary agency employees year-round to keep up with their work. And in the last year, they took on utility patching for water distribution, which was done initially with a temporary employee. That service has worked out, and so we would like to convert that to a regular position. The position is mostly funded by a transfer in from the water fund to the street fund to cover those utility patching expenses. And you'll see a corresponding drop in the planned expenditure for temporary employees, which I'll point out when we get to that program. In the facility maintenance and engineering program and operations, we're not requesting an additional FTE, but we are asking to reclassify 1 position upward from an analyst to an analyst 2 position. This is the group that operates our asset management software system, and which maintains the inventory of all of our assets in Public Works across all of our utilities and our facilities. They generate work orders for preventive and predictive maintenance. They do analytical reports on useful life of assets. It's a growing and important piece of work that we do. So this position change reflects an increase in responsibilities we're asking of 1 employee.
So have the next position to talk about. For engineering, we're requesting one additional entry-level engineering position in the design and construction work group. When possible, we'd like to bring staff on at the lowest level, or that entry-level position, so we can train them. And ideally, we get someone straight out of school, train them how we want to train them, and then if everything's going well, we would come back later when they have their professional license, 4 or 5 years later, request a reclassification up to a licensed engineering position that's at a higher level. So we're not requesting that higher level position now, we're requesting that entry level position, but I just want to be transparent about what the long-term plan would be. The need for this position is really driven by workload. Right now we have 3 design engineers, one that manages treatment plant, lift station, pump station type projects, and 2 that do the majority of our water, sewer, street, and stormwater projects. Right now we have 2 less design engineers than we had when the city moved into the City Hall building in 1996, despite having more projects and more complexity in projects, especially from a regulatory standpoint and a permitting standpoint. Right now I feel like we have staff managing unreasonable workloads, working some unsustainable schedules, and we're still seeing undesirable project delays. And I'm worried that we're either going to start losing the very good staff that we have, or if we don't, either provide some additional capacity for them to address the workload or reduce the expectations. I do want to point out that this position that we're requesting, though, is necessary to respond only to our existing workload. So if we're successful in other efforts to identify additional funding for, say, stormwater capital projects or street maintenance type activities, we'll have to revisit staffing when that time comes as well. So just want to forewarn you about that. Yes, sir.
How much of your staff is ready or could be ready in the near future to retire?
That's a real problem that we've been living with for the last several years. It's interesting, the first, 10 or so years that I worked here, we had a pretty stable, consistent work group, and over the last 5-6 years, a lot of the people with 30, 35 years here that have an extreme amount of institutional knowledge, exceptional work ethic. I mean, just people that you just hurt losing. We've had a lot of them retire, and we continue to have that be a pattern for us. So it's a real challenge, something we're trying to be mindful of and have plans for to address that.
So coincidentally, our budget presentation for the last few years has taken place during National Public Works Week, so happy National Public Works Week, everyone. In the past, Public Works has typically operated under the assumption that if the public didn't notice us, we were doing our job. You turn the faucet and water comes out, you drive around town, and there are appropriate street signs in appropriate places. We recognize that if we do our jobs well, we might remain largely anonymous, but it's also critical that we talk more publicly about all of the work that goes into the reliability of our infrastructure. Sometimes in our industry, it's hard to engage the public because with very limited exceptions, things just always work. And we want things to continue to always work. But we also need to help our customers understand that there's a lot that's happening behind the scenes to make it that way. So as we move forward, we as a department are going to try to be more vocal and public about all the effort that goes in to make everything work, because it's not just as simple as turning a faucet and having clean water come out. So this concludes our PowerPoint presentation. Do you have any additional questions for us at this time?
Go ahead.
So my issue has to do with street maintenance, and at a work session a month or two ago, well, more than that, Jeff, but you pointed out, I think we used to have funds in excess of $1 million, a lot of it being the franchise utility fees that were dedicated for street funds that have since been reallocated to other departments. And so, Peter, this might be more of a question for you, but, you know, with the disaster results of going to the voters for a gas tax, are there some plans at looking at reallocating those funds back to the street department? I mean, I'm guessing not in this budget, but again, we continue to kick the can further down the road, and personally, I'd be against any additional fees. As, you know, we talked about a street fee or transportation fee, or until we get those funds back where they were in the first place.
Right.
But maybe you can shed some light on that.
Well, you know, I can state the problem again for you, as you kind of started out with, that those funds, I think, and Jeff will correct me if I'm wrong, but they won't, even if you reverse them back to street maintenance, they won't address the problem entirely. Certainly, it would be wise to look at that, but that, as we've talked about before, will require prioritization decisions in other parts of the city's budget. We do need to, following the ballot, the results of the ballot, need to get with council and talk about what efforts we can pull together to address the problem, and what mix of solutions would be appropriate. Because it really will come down to a mix of solutions. I don't think there's one sock that you can put all of the problems into, or one solution to the broad problem. But certainly, sending those monies back, I couldn't tell you what exactly would suffer if you just reverse the course, you know, what would have to not be done. But that'll be part of the discussion, absolutely.
Well, I think it's a little hard, personally, for me to go to voters and say we'd like some more money. You know, the typical response you get from a citizen is, hey, I pay my taxes, why aren't the roads fixed? You know, and to look them in the face and say, well, we used to have $1 million, but now it's going somewhere else. That just doesn't work. So.
Well, I think that going somewhere else is the key. Where is the somewhere else, and what would you then lose if you took that $1 million and you sent it back to the streets?
Right, and I understand that. I also understand $1 million isn't the solution, but it's certainly a start, and a little easier to look the voter or the citizen in the face and say, you know, we're doing what we can. So I guess, again, this budget is most likely going to be passed tonight, and it's a little late in the game to ask staff to go back and rework everything, and I know there'd be impacts on other departments where that money was reallocated, and I'm just one out of however many we have tonight, 14 or 15. I guess my point is that I would like to see staff bring something forward to council on that within the next few months, and let's start making some progress towards trying to resolve that problem. We've heard all the presentations and seen the diagrams and graphs and so forth, but, you know, several councilors raised one of them, is we just continue to kick this down the road. And it's not going to get any better, and we know that. So I'd like to see that as a priority moving forward.
Colleen.
So since you brought up, you know, contributions to reserves and being able to fund the liabilities and/or maintenance, are we still talking? I happen to have the opportunity to attend a council meeting months ago, and the number was brought up, 25 million to bring us to a good point in street maintenance, and then it'd be approximately another 5 million per year for street maintenance, and that was just arterials and connectors. Is that number still?
Yeah, those
Okay.
are still, I think it was $24 million or $25 million one-time, or, you know, big infusion, and then an annual increase of $5 million over what we currently have. And of course, that would have to adjust with inflation as well.
So continuing with that, that only addressed arterials and connectors, and that didn't address residential, and we know the tax was defeated just recently. Do you have an estimate of what it would take to come to balance on residential, and what the yearly maintenance would be for that portion?
I don't remember.
No, we don't. The path we were on was to evaluate the arterials and collectors first, to find out.
But we went for a tax, so somebody must have done the homework and said 5 cents a gallon is reasonable, and 1.5 million a year would do something.
was just a number.
No,
So-
we
No,
have the
we did
amount
not
of,
provide a number to the council on residential streets. The council discussed implementing or putting a gas tax to the voters, and they settled on the 5-cent number. And we don't have, we
Okay.
have not done the work to figure out what it would take to get residential streets up to we haven't even asked council what they would think the appropriate level of service for residential streets is.
What
on
we
the
did
scale.
have was a condition assessment of residential streets. So there is undoubtedly a significant need there. We didn't make it far enough in our process to get to the numbers that Chris was just talking about, but there's no question that there's a much greater need there.
And I'm sorry to continue with the same line question. In wastewater, water, stormwater, transit, airport, do you have any other numbers in the way of, here's my come to balance that we're unfunded in liability, and here's what our unfunded yearly contribution should be? I mean, we just threw out 25 and 5 for streets. Do you have similar numbers for any of the other sections of your departments? I haven't heard any numbers thrown right.
I can, I'll tag on to...
I'm trying to get my arms around how big our problem is.
Yep, so I'll expand on a little bit, because I wanted to note, just follow up to your your comments at the last budget meeting, in that, talking about long-range planning. And that's one thing that Public Works does really, really well. You look at our master plans, we're planning out to build out of the urban growth boundary. Sometimes, transportation's not quite as far, 20 years, but utilities are out to build out, so maybe 50 years out. You have a CIP, which is a 5-year plan. You have annual plans put together with the budget. You have annual assessments done for rates, which also have individual 5-year forecasts that council evaluates every year. So we go through that, setting long-term goals and short-term targets to get to those long-term goals on an annual basis, and I think we do it pretty well. So we set those needs and targets based on, we being collectively, staff works with council. Council makes the decisions. We go away and do what they tell us to do. And that's largely what drives the rate increases, is based on trying to meet specific targets. So we are, with these rate increases, we're on target for, we're on a path to get back on target for water. We're on a great track for wastewater. We just talked about what our street deficit is. Stormwater's another tough one. We've only looked inside 50% of the pipe. So we have 135 miles of pipe, and Chris and her crews have had eyes on 50% of the system. Of that 50% of the system, we know that 8 miles of it has either completely failed already or is in a condition that it's anticipated to fail within the next 10 years. Beyond that, there's another mile of pipe that has significant root intrusions that need to be addressed. And that's just looking in 50% of the system, because nobody's had eyes, this hasn't been done that we're aware of ever. Big unfunded need there. That's something council's wrestling with right now. We actually go back next month to talk with council about what targets we might want to set on the stormwater front.
Well, plus you mentioned that we don't know what the ramifications are for the final agreement coming down from DEQ is going to be, which could change the whole picture dramatically.
We also have a stormwater permit that we're up against. The financial consequences of dealing with the pipe are greater than the financial consequences of the permit. So they're both significant, but the pipe's a greater liability. I have the numbers in here somewhere, but they're not a definitive answer to your question, because as far as cost, because all of this depends on how fast do you want to get to a certain target. Council hasn't selected a target yet, and they haven't decided how fast they want to get there. So until we get to that point, I can't tell you what that gap is. I can only tell you what we talked about with council a month or two ago.
So big questions with stormwater and the DEQ permit. Do you have anything else on wastewater, transit fund, or airport? Are they also unknowns?
Well, wastewater is in good shape. We have a target with council that we have set years ago and have updated, and we're on the path to maintain that system at a pace that the council feels is appropriate.
Okay.
Similar with water. Transit and airport, there are some, I would say there are some minor needs at the airport. Wouldn't even approach the type of number we're talking about here. Most of the major capital needs at the airport have been taken care of through FAA grants. And so that facility is in pretty good shape. Transit program, the major problem there will be local match for the federal grants. You know, we could do a lot more if we had more local match for federal grants, but the service is what it is now, and as we are able to add to it, we will. But I don't think those would equate to the millions of dollars that we're talking about with the street and stormwater system. That's not the same scale of problem.
Thank you very much.
This is a problem we have created in the past by ourselves. Now, we have spent a whole lot of time looking at new stuff, but we don't look at the old stuff. I mean, you guys have the new stuff all on, yeah, we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and it's got a schedule that we can move around, and, you know. The old stuff, we pretty much threw that away. I mean, years ago, we took millions of dollars out of the fund by transferring the franchise fees out of the streets. Then we went on and spent time and took millions and millions more out of the budget by creating CARA, because that's exactly what that does. And then if we don't have enough money to do this, so we took the streets and took them out of the budget. There's lines there, but we don't do anything with them. It is a problem of our own making, and I say own making, it is the council who has done this over, past councils. I don't know how far back it goes, but it is the council that needs to do something about it. Now, when we start talking about we don't have enough money and there is no way we can find enough money in the short term, but we're not looking at everything. Ray came up with a way to put some CARA money into the streets the other day. I think it's easier if we just don't take all the, if ARA would just not ask for all of the money that they could get from the system and then just say that's going to go to the street fees. But bottom line, we don't know what we don't know because people don't want to know. I mean, we have in the past, that's the boogeyman that's over there. And it's too big of a problem for us to fix right now. So for all those years, it's been sitting there festering. We're coming to the point where we don't have a choice. We have to, and it needs to be put back in the budget. It needs to have, and of course, when you do that, when you put it back in the budget, you then have to evaluate everything. I mean, I know Ed has said in the past with parks that he does a listing of what's the most important thing and the least important thing. And he kind of goes through, I don't know if he does, and makes check marks on everything or not, but the council never gets that. Because while each department may do that, that's internal. And having to make the tough decisions, each department's fighting for their own. What is more important, item number 37 on your list or item number 54 on the police or fire list? I mean, that's a political decision that we never get because it hasn't been done. So we're at a place where I think we need to recognize, I mean, the people pretty much said last Tuesday, not just no, but hell no. And I think that should be loud and clear. It certainly was to me, well, to me and Mike before, because we didn't vote for it to begin with, but we've got a gravel road we're going to be traveling for a while.
Thank you.
I'm going to bite my tongue on a lot of the stuff that's been stated. And mostly, I'm not going to get into debate from the outcome from last week's vote. But I do want to say is we provide a lot of quality services in our community for the amount of taxes that we have, and to be able to, and all the departments, on how they're able to get the budget balance and still provide the services that the council says they want to have these services. The thing that we're going to have to be looking at, and it's easy to point fingers of spending of funding here or there, but a lot of it is the political will. We know 5 cents a gallon was not enough. We know that it needed to be a lot more. And also when it comes to sewer and water rates, we're there trying to look at what is going to be sellable to the consumer, and we're looking out for the consumer's pocketbook. We can all sit here and say fees should be this is what we want to provide for services, this is what we need for all infrastructure, but bottom line, it's what is sellable to the consumer. So that's where the councils over the years has looked out for the pocketbook of the taxpayers and still being able to try to, provide the most quality services we can in the city. So we can point fingers at all kinds of things of what has been spent here and there, but bottom line, you look at what we've been able to do in our community, we should be proud of what services we're able to provide and the amount of quality services we have. And we're also looking out for the consumer's pocketbook on that, so I'll get off my soapbox.
I guess we can agree to disagree.
But I can debate everything you say, Rich, but I'm not going to do it.
Well, you're the one
so.
who told the public that if they don't pass the 5 cents, we can just have a street fee.
No,
And
I
don't
did
know
not.
what,
I
yes, you
didn't say
did.
that.
You said it online.
I said, nope, you read it wrong. I said it was an option. The council has only 3 funding
Yeah.
sources. That is ballot measure.
It's an option, so if you don't do
Yeah.
what we want, we'll do what we want anyway.
Yeah. No,
I mean,
well,
that's the
they've
way to
got
get
an
somebody to
option.
pass something.
So, well,
sir.
then you shouldn't have been trying to be negative towards it, so, yeah. Switch subjects.
Okay. Nobody's saying that the city has done a poor job of what the money that they've had. Nobody's saying that. What we're saying is, we need to take a different direction and a different look at this, because we're in a huge deficit. So it's time to take a look at what historically has been done and move it in a different direction. It's kind of like turning the Titanic. And so nobody's criticizing what the city's done with their money, with the money that's been available to them. What we're saying is, it may be time to take a different approach and go a different direction to make things happen. That's what is being said. So don't take what's being said personally. It's just, it is what it is. We have to turn the ship. And that's what Rich is saying, and that's what I'm saying.
Then bring us a plan how you're going to turn the ship.
You know, Sharon? Man, I'm sorry, I've got to stop there. Thank you.
Okay. As we go through the individual program sheets in the budget, we typically discuss them in small groups, so to try to make it a little more efficient use of our time. Jeff and I will be alternating as we come to programs that we each are responsible for. This is a pretty high-level look from our perspective. We talk about a lot of these things with council throughout the year in terms of the capital improvement program and specific needs in the different utilities. So we're not going to go into great detail on each program sheet, but feel free to ask questions about any program sheet you may have, and we will find the answer for you. So we're going to start in the budget book on page 188. So the first section we'll talk about is the airport. On pages 188 through 191, there are 2 programs in this section. The first one is the airport operating budget on pages 188 and 189. This program pays for the operation and maintenance of Albany Municipal Airport. There are not a lot of significant changes in this program next year. The one new thing I'll point out on page 189, at the bottom in line 91290 is a new transfer that will be going out to the street operating fund. This is, the street maintenance crew does some basic maintenance at the airport, such as mowing and spraying for weeds, et cetera. And the airport is now going to start paying for that work. So, street maintenance funds, right there. Think of what
One
we'll
for
do
you,
with
Chris.
$7,400.
Yes.
Way to go, Chris.
Yeah.
That's 12.3 pounds.
I'm doing my part. The next program is the Airport Capital budget on pages 190 and 191. This is the program that receives a portion of the transient lodging tax revenue. And it is used specifically for capital projects at the airport, not operating funds. So, generally speaking, this program provides the local match for FAA grants. And the main project we have that this fund will be transferring out to the FAA grant program is a big project that will happen this summer to resurface the main parking apron and change the configuration of some taxiways. Yes, sir.
I believe there's a typo on page 191 on general revenues. It's for the 2017-18 budget. It shows 1,500, and it actually should be 7,500 because when you go over, it shows a 400% increase, and actually it should be, it would be a wash.
The budget,
The adjusted budget shows 7,500.
yes, for requests for next year.
Right, but it shows the adjusted budget
Is in the current year,
1,500. And
1,500.
it should be 7,500 if you add the two together.
No, so the adjusted, yes. Jeff?
Third column from the left is the 2017-18.
It's actually everything from the adjusted to the left.
Several typos.
Okay, we'll fix that. I don't know what's going on, but I'm sure that the accountants can fix it.
Yeah.
All three of them, yeah.
All three of those columns, it's just a, it's not going to change the net result, but it just reads incorrectly because it's not added correctly.
I see. Okay, thank you. Are there any questions on the airport programs? Yes?
Yeah, because we've had our fifth space operator for a few years now, and he seems like he's, pretty, go-to
well.
guy and stuff, How's it doing, like, for the fuel and the, just the service and what's coming into the airport? I mean, he seems like he's doing really well and has some good ideas.
Yeah, we've heard nothing but good things about him, and, he brings good ideas. This year, he's added a jet fuel truck to try to test out that market.
Okay.
We'll be getting a report from him on that to see if it's worth investing in a fixed tank for jet fuel. He seems to be doing really well. I haven't heard any complaints from the airport folks at all.
So did they win the lottery out there? There's no central service charges?
$900.
If you go back to the airport operating, on page 189, there are central service charges that we pay.
Okay.
On page 189. The capital budget doesn't pay central service charges. Capital budgets typically don't pay central service charges.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to transit. The transit budget start on page 192. Sorry, allergies. Albany has 3 transit programs: the Albany Transit System, the Limbit and Loop, and Paratransit or Colorado. Each of those programs has its own budget. These are primarily supported by federal transit grants, and local funds provide the match for those grants. There are different match ratios depending on what it is you're doing, because it's, of course, not simple. The Limbit and Loop on page 195 and 196 doesn't receive any City of Albany funds per se. The loop is funded by a portion of the federal grant that would go to Albany Transit System, and the same portion is provided from Corvallis Transit System. So ATS, CTS, and then the local match is provided by partnerships with LBCC and OSU.
Pardon me. Where in these two sections do you have bus replacement funds, or are they in a different section?
So, okay, for instance, on page 193, it might be page 194.
Okay.
On page 194 in 66011 is the equipment replacement line. So what this is showing is how much we're putting away each year towards equipment replacement. There's a separate equipment replacement fund that holds that money and is managed by finance. And when we go to purchase a bus, we transfer that money back out from equipment replacement into this program to pay for the match. So we don't put away much money considering how much buses cost, but we only have to pay for 20% of the bus because it's an 80-20 match for that. So we're doing pretty well in terms of equipment replacement for the bus system because we only have to put away 20% of the cost of the vehicles.
Okay, thank you.
The total, I can tell you what the total amount is in that equipment replacement fund if you'd like to, but it's not reflected in these sheets.
What is it?
Yeah,
what is it?
I should have offered that.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
You offered it up.
Oh, hang on, I got it right here. Somewhere.
Never tell somebody that you can do something for them without being able to do it. They've been disappointed.
I know, well, prepare to be disappointed.
Okay.
I got it somewhere.
Yeah, we're beyond that.
Oh, here we go. Okay, hang on now, I just gotta find the right page.
You want to sing a song or something while we're waiting?
The Holy Roman
How much
Church
you
is neither
borrowed?
holy nor Roman nor church.
God save the Queen.
Hang on, I'm almost there. Okay, here we go. Albany Transit System is estimated at the end of June to have $166,446 in equipment
that's good.
replacement. The Loop is estimated to have $120,450 in equipment
Can you
replacement.
get more concise?
No. And Paratransit is estimated to have $71,560 at the end of this fiscal year in equipment replacement.
Fantastic, thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
You probably shouldn't do that. These street guys are probably going to want to siphon that off.
I know. No one take our transit money.
That's the buses wearing the streets out, that's.
It's the garbage trucks.
Chris, on page 193,
Don't weigh anything.
there's a very pleasant drop in insurance and bonds. So is that because of a safety record or?
So it probably is because we had a claim, so insurance is looking at the last 3 years of claims, so there probably was a claim 4 years ago that dropped off, would be my guess.
It's good.
Okay, so the only other thing on transit I wanted to point out is that HB 2017, which was the state transportation bill that was passed, included some additional funding for transit, public transit programs. The rules for that funding are being written now, and we expect to include requests for that funding in the next budget request, beginning fiscal year 1920. So those funds are not available yet, but hopefully in the next budget request, you'll see that we can request some additional funds from the state, which will help us improve our transit service years ahead of when we would be able to do that otherwise, so. Any questions, other questions on transit programs?
Well, Chris, and you may have answered this, and I missed it, but it says reserve bus barn, $250,000?
Yes.
That's
So,
good.
as council is aware, the fire department greatly desires a training area behind Station 12. And So we've been saving money to purchase property for a bus barn for the last few years. That money will show up in the next budget that we look at. We're socking it away, and we'll be coming back to the council very soon to talk about that again. So we'd like to purchase property with that money, and then we can apply for some FTA grants to build a new bus facility.
So where you're socking it away, where's the money coming from?
It comes, basically, it's coming from leftover ending balance that we're not spending every year. We take our ending balance, if we have some money left over in Albany Transit or Paratransit, and we transfer it to the facilities replacement budget.
All right, thank you.
So they've saved their pennies.
Yeah, I'd say.
Okay, next is the Facilities Replacement Fund, which is on pages 201 and 202.
What page are you on?
201 and 202.
203,
This is a program that receives money from different public works funds and pays for needs within the department. So, for instance, in the current fiscal year, we have some roof replacements that are going on at operations that have been funded through this program. For next fiscal year, we're just saving money, building reserves, so that we can use that money for the next need. So the bus barn reserve is line 90038. You can see that we have about $350,000 saved for bus barn needs.
So is that the 250 plus
Yeah.
what's in here?
No, this is the total. So we're anticipating being able to move more over, that 250 over, but if we can't, we put the lower amount here.
I see.
Okay. Next, we'll move on to the street fund. So first, we have street maintenance revenues on page 203. This program receives state gas tax money, which is the primary funder for the street maintenance program. You can see that in line 42412. It's roughly about the same anticipated revenue as this year for street maintenance activities.
I do have a question, as your miscellaneous revenue dropped off precipitously. Do you have any clue as to why?
Well, I think we budget a very small amount every year because that's one of those things that we don't know is coming in. Jeff Babbitt, do you know what would have made up those miscellaneous revenues?
Sale of equipment, other things that streets would sell, and John might have a better idea, actually, what.
It might have been our, the insurance payoff for our street sweeper that blew up. So this would be just things that were not expected to happen, that we get money. If we take a vehicle to auction, this is where that would come in. But we don't budget anticipating doing that because we try to budget conservatively.
Okay. So this is just to give you budgetary authority?
Right. So just in this fiscal year, for instance, we budgeted $1,000. We've already received over $17,000. It's just money we didn't expect to receive from the sale of equipment, probably. I don't remember exactly what it was.
You have to have a place to assign the revenue to, and when you don't know when you can't anticipate what it is in advance, it's classified as miscellaneous.
All right. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Does the street fund gasoline tax, is the anticipated amount coming from the new state gas tax already included?
Yeah, so the total anticipated amount for state gas tax next fiscal year is about $3.8 million, which is an increase with the new state gas tax that was raised last year. Only a little over $3 million appears here. The remainder appears in street capital and is used towards capital projects. So we do anticipate slightly more state gas tax. This is the amount that's needed to fund the operating programs, is what appears in this program, this sheet here. Okay, so next we have street maintenance on pages 204 and 205. This is one of the programs where the only program in operations we're requesting an additional FTE, so at the bottom of the sheet there, you'll see it goes from 6.65 to 7.65. The FTE on this page are a little bit weird because we actually have 8 FTE assigned to street maintenance, but because some of their work is paid for by stormwater, because they do stormwater-related work, the portion of the positions that's funded by stormwater appears in the stormwater program sheet, so I'll point that out when we get there. So, yeah, hopefully that makes sense.
Point being, we didn't add staff to take on any stormwater activities.
No.
It's how the employees have to be quantified as a budget requirement.
Yeah, we haven't added any actual stormwater staff, but we'll talk about that later, much later. So in the program budget itself, the total personnel services is going up by quite a bit. This is primarily the new FTE is causing that 21% increase. And then the next line down, 60101, you'll see a decrease, which is where we pay for temporary employees. And so that decrease is primarily due to needing one less temporary employee.
Chris, I see on page 206, it driving the point home on measures and workload indicators on percentage of collector and arterial streets, the percentage is dropping in quality, which is driving
Yes.
the whole point home for the need.
Right, in the street admin program, that's the metric we use there. And, you know, the streets will continue to decline. On page 205, the other thing that I point out every year, and so it wouldn't be the same if I didn't point it out, is streetlights, which is 63008. Street maintenance pays for all of the streetlights in town. It's over $500,000 now next year. We will be looking at the LED streetlight program, but we've budgeted over $500,000 for that. The street
I'm not
admin,
saying my neighborhood needs a street light, but there is one that can't stay on and makes horrific noise.
I keep reading it, it says to get the number off of the telephone pole that it's on, and you can report that.
I will do that.
I haven't done it on mine, but the same thing's happening on mine.
No,
Call PP&L.
Actually, you just, online, you report it and just do the intersection address to it.
That's it.
So
But
that's all
you get the pole number that it's on, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
you don't need the pole, but just that address works.
So 206 and 207, this is street administration program. This program pays for overarching street fund work. And it also holds the operating contingency for the street operating programs at the bottom of the page there in line 99005. And now Jeff is going to talk about street capital.
All right, so street capital budgets are on pages 208 through 217. We have just the general street capital budget, North Albany frontage-free projects program, TSDCIs and Rs, and then the ADA capital program. There really should not be any surprises in any of these capital budgets. I'm not going to go through them in any great detail because we've already done that through the CIP process. The new projects of most significance that we're taking on are the rest of Hill Street from 24th to 34th Avenue. We're partnering with Snow Temp to improve Lochner Road from Marion Street down to where the Oregon Youth Authority constructed their frontage improvements. And then we have a traffic signal going in at Crocker and Gibson Hill in North Albany, all projects that we talked about through the CIP. I did want to note, though, that Finance distributed some updated pages for you, specifically the TSDCI budget shown on page 213. There was some data missing on the original printed version, and then we also needed to move the Lochner Road contribution to next fiscal year and increase it to $600,000 to reflect a recent council action. So the budget sheet that should have been distributed to you is the most current and reflects your current obligation to that project. We also updated that budget to reflect a recent payment to ODOT for the Knox Butte Interchange project. That $200,000 contribution that council had authorized towards that had been held in reserve specifically for several years. Projects has progressed to the point where ODOT was substantially complete with design, so we received our bill for that, and we've paid that. Let's see. Last thing I'll draw your attention to on the street capital budgets is the ADA capital budget on 217, where we're building reserves to complete some larger accessibility projects. We made this point through the CIP, we've made this point in the past. We'd like to draw attention to the fact that although we're not funding any specific projects out of this budget, that does not mean that we are not making other accessibility improvements throughout the city, whether that be in the Parks Department, at Parks facilities, or curb ramps and those types of things as part of our street projects. So there's improvements happening all over town every year, regardless of whether there's projects shown in this budget. This is for dedicated ADA projects.
Yeah, I have that flag with a big good because Portland just recently lost a $13 million lawsuit for not doing ADA compliance work that they should have been doing. So the fact that we're doing that keeps us below the radar screen. So,
yeah, there's a number of jurisdictions across the state that have had action taken against them in the last several years. Council will be hearing more about this. We'll be bringing forward an updated ADA transition plan in the next, 6 to 12 months. All right, that's all I had on the street budgets. Any questions about those capital budgets before we move on to sewer?
How do those ADA projects get paid for? Is that federal money, or do we just do it?
No, that depends on where you do it. So, for instance, through the Community Development Block Program, there's been ADA improvements constructed. That's obviously federal money. Street money comes from...
Not very much.
Right. Street money, it's gas. It's either gas tax or transportation program funds through the state. So you get transfers from streets into this particular budget, and then transit has historically made some small transfers in order to save up money for transit ADA improvements.
So that's another place where gas tax money gets sucked away, isn't it?
It is. Or it can be. All right. Sewer funds are on pages 218 through 243. Total proposed sewer budget is $55 million. That does incorporate that $13 million loan that we talked about for the RFI. Annual debt service payments for the water reclamation facility and Talking Waters Garden are a little over $5 million, which represents almost a third of our anticipated rate and SDC revenue. So a significant amount of the revenue that we're taking in is going towards paying our debts for our recent treatment plant projects. This year, we were able to refinance that debt, which reduced our annual debt service payments by $350,000 and will save the city about $4 million over the life of that loan. We're funding the payment for that Riverfront Interceptor loan based on those savings, so such that the overall debt obligation is unchanged. We don't have rate impacts associated with taking on that new debt. That loan for the RFI is from DEQ. It's at a 1% interest rate and a 0.5% fees on remaining principal. So it's a very low interest rate loan. We pointed out earlier the budget's been built on the assumption of a 3.5% sewer rate increase that would take place this July 1st. Council recently received a full report on sewer rates and decided to move forward with that 3.5% increase. We're actually doing something a little bit different this year where we're talking about all of the utility needs at one time. We'll take all of those rate resolutions forward in June at the same time that council considers the budget and the CIP. All those actions will be taken at once to put those in place. The rates will change at the same points in time throughout the year as they always have. And so we'll talk about those as they come to them. But for instance, sewer will take place July 1, but the new water rate won't take place till January 1. The resolution will pass, but it won't be effective till January 1. Trying to make sure that we're considering those things as a whole. I'll let Chris talk about sewer operating budgets, and I'll go back to capital.
Okay, so we have 6 operating budgets, beginning on page 219. First, we have the wastewater treatment plant. If you look at the budget sheet on page 220, line 60254 is where we pay the cost to haul the wastewater solids to the landfill. And that number is going up again just due to fees and increased cost associated with that work. Otherwise, not a whole lot has changed with this budget. I will point out on the power and light line, which is 63006, our staff, and Jorge has been leading this effort. We've put in a lot of work to understand energy use and management at the wastewater treatment plant. And so not only are we using less energy per million gallons of treatment, which is our metric, this year, or next budget, we're actually anticipating using less, spending less on electricity altogether. So that budget, that line is forecast to decrease by $60,000, which is due to a lot of work that the treatment plant staff has put in on that project.
Question for you. Going back to the hauling fees, I'm assuming that includes the materials we're hauling for Lebanon.
We haven't received any materials from Lebanon yet.
Oh, is that right?
Right? Nope.
Huh.
We have not received any.
You signed an agreement with them, I think we talked about that.
Right. It was for emergencies in case their plant was overwhelmed.
Okay.
Which they managed to. This winter wasn't actually that bad. It rained a lot, but not intensely, so I think they were able to manage.
Okay, thanks.
Chris, is the increase on that same line, 66254, is that because the landfill raised their rates on us?
So rates have gone up, the total volume that we're hauling is going up, so it's just a combination of things.
I mean, how do they charge for that? I mean, do they, like, per load, or?
They charge by weight.
By weight.
And so, initially, we, I think, had negotiated a rate with them, and they held it steady for several years. And then, they recently have given us annual rate increases. They're not a lot every year, but, you know, when you're hauling so much weight, 3% increase will add up quite a bit.
Okay, thanks.
We do have when we get to the capital, I don't know if Jeff will talk about, maybe we have that project scheduled for the potential solution.
Yes.
So hopefully this line will be going away in the next several years. So the next program we have is Wastewater Collections, page 221, 222. In the performance measures, I'd like to just point out on the program narrative page, down in the performance measures, we have volume of sanitary sewer overflow, and this current fiscal year is only 230,000 gallons, which is a lot, but quite a bit lower than previous years. These are the overflows that will be dealt with in the RFI project. These are overflows happening at constructed points, but underneath the rainfall amounts that where DEQ would allow us to do that. So we haven't received enforcement action, but those need to be eliminated, and that's what that Riverfront Interceptor project will do.
We have received enforcement, just not recently.
Well, yeah, years ago we got enforcement, but not in my time. Let's see, on the actual program budget itself, I should point out at the bottom of that page again, this is the other budget where the total number of FTE is 9, but the number here is reduced to reflect the work that's paid for by Stormwater. So the 7.85 is the sort of the effective FTE, if you will, in this program. The rest are paid for by Stormwater operating budget. Otherwise, this program is pretty much status quo. Not a whole lot is happening here that's new and different. In wastewater admin, this program is similar to street administration. It pays for overarching wastewater work that goes across the utility. Let's see. This program contains the contingency again at the very bottom, so these are operating contingency funds. We try to keep about 10% contingency in this budget. And then the other thing is, I'll point out, in transfers out in line 91258, that dollar amount is for potential litigation that we're involved in right now.
Just to clarify, this is one individual, correct? It's for this budget?
Yes.
So 160, almost 161,000 is the total compensation package for that?
Yes. Worth every penny. The next program we have is water reuse and biosolids, which is on pages 225 and 226. This program hasn't been really used for a number of years. Once we get the biosolids facility online, assuming that everything goes well with our pre-design and design and construction, then this program will start back up again. We've just held it in hopes that we'll get to use it again.
When did you say the anticipated date of that maybe kind of sort of happening?
Yeah, I didn't really say. Our plan is to have the pre-design report completed by the end of this calendar year. And then if there aren't any red flags or any serious problems that arise, then we hope to move into design right after that. And so actual construction and operation would be maybe fiscal year 2021, something like that.
So when you say end of this year, is that fiscal or calendar? Okay, thank
Pre-design
you.
by the end of calendar year 18.
All right, thank you.
So do you have an estimate as to what it has cost us for the cannibal process to fail?
Well, yes. I don't have it on the top of my head.
No, give me a rough estimate.
Well, if you account that we received the settlement from Siemens, then we're pretty much even. Yeah, we're not in the hole.
You have a lot of angry neighbors.
Yeah, there have been other non-economic problems that have come from this whole thing, but
Yeah.
economically, we're not behind.
Well, we're fortunate to have good legal help on that, aren't we? Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
And I suppose you could blame the council for going in for the cannibal process, but
Well,
it came with high recommendations,
Yes, you did.
and I'm sorry I wasn't more of a
it's
pessimist about it.
It's been, it's a shame for a community this size to have to spend this much money again and again.
Yeah.
It's disappointing. Okay, last
And it's a
operating.
distraction also.
Yes, it certainly
Big
is.
distraction.
I'd like to be doing other things besides lawsuit-related things. Last operating program is Talking Water Garden Wetland budget. Again, this budget is pretty much steady going into next year. And yeah, not much going on that. Oh, wait, not the last operating budget, the next to the last. The last one is industrial pretreatment, on pages 229 and 230. This program provides permits for what we call significant industrial users in the community. It's required by our discharge permit. It's a federally regulated program. Not a whole lot of change here, other than typical up and down with personnel and operating costs. And Jeff is going to take capital programs.
All right, so capital budgets are on pages 231 through 239. There's 4 of them: sewer capital, equipment replacement, and then the 2 SDC budgets. Projects that are included here are consistent with what we talked about through the CIP process. Equipment replacement's the only one that's not part of that CIP process. So if you have questions about that, Chris will take care of those. On page 232, that's where you see the revenue coming in for the DEQ loan for the Riverfront Interceptor project. And then on pages 237 and 239, you can see large transfers out from SDCI and SDCR to the debt service budget, which is the next one that I want to talk about. It's on pages 240 and 241. So I talked about our recent refinancing efforts, and after that refinancing, our payments total for the two treatment facilities about $5 million a year. A little over $1.5 million of that is supposed to be SDC's responsibility for the payment. So they have a percentage that they're supposed to pay on the principal balance or the principal payment each year. I think you've heard me say a number of times over the last couple of years that SDC revenue is not keeping pace with that obligation, and I don't expect that to change. The gap is significant. What's happening is, or what will happen is that we've been living off reserves to cover that SDC obligation for a long time, and as we depleted those reserves to make that SDC payment, we're going to have to start looking at, are we going to use rate money to cover SDC's share of that payment? And at that point, council will have another difficult decision to make on whether you do less projects each year as a result of that in order to cover that debt service payment, or whether you take on additional rate increases in an attempt to try to get the same amount of capital work completed. That should be coming to a head over the course of this next year. So that's a conversation that we'll have to start having in the very near future. Sewer economic development funds on pages 242 and 243. Really not much happening in that budget this year. We have no rate money being directed to it. We're already at the policy level of $500,000, so we're not directing any additional funds to that. And that's actually the last sewer budget, so I'll move on to water if there aren't other questions.
Just one question on the program narrative. It says that the fund balance will be capped at $500,000, but then down under the strategies and action, it says build reserves for future projects. Is that a dichotomy that it's going to be capped and yet we need more reserves?
I'll say no, because we're collecting interest, and so we are building reserves.
Well, and every year we shift, like if, for instance, if sewer economic development were to contribute a significant amount of money towards a project one year, by the next fiscal year, we'll budget to shift additional money over to bring it back up to $500,000.
Okay, so that is the, okay.
Anytime we have a budget like that where there's nothing else going on, it's going to say build reserves, because they tell us we have to put something there, even though there's nothing taking place.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If it's supposed to be 500,000, it looks like 545,000.
It does look like that.
It's just round figures that's about right, so it's okay.
It could be any number of things. It could be interest. So we're accumulating interest on that. So we were at 500 at one point, or it's went above it, or we transferred a little bit more. It's still the same money. It can still be spent on the same things. So yeah, I recognize it's a little above.
Well, it's nice to have a cushion in something.
It doesn't hurt anything.
Other than you can't use it for something else.
Well, we could.
We could transfer it over.
It's just rate money. Council could have us move it to anything if you wanted it.
I'd like a new car.
Probably can't do that.
Maybe not that.
All right, we ready for water?
Sure.
Okay. Total water budget is approaching $27 million. I got a short intro. The budgets have been prepared with the assumption of a 5% rate increase next fiscal year. Talked about the process that we're going through now. That rate increase will be effective January 1st. So the resolution will go to council in June. If it's passed, it'll become effective January 1st, 2019. You got a couple here, and then it's back to me.
All right, so the operating budgets begin on page 245 with water administration. Again, similar to the other administration funds, it pays across for activity across the water fund. Also holds the contingency down at the bottom for the operating budgets, which is roughly 10% of the operating budget. Next, sorry?
Question?
Mm-hmm.
This is one person.
Yes, also one person also working on it.
One person that has memberships and dues of $7,800.
No. The memberships are for the utility. So for instance, we have a utility membership in the American Water Works Association, so that, which several of us can participate in, trainings.
More than one person.
Yeah, it's across the whole utility, right? Yes. Good. Next, we have the canal budget, pages 247, 248.
One question on the canal budget.
Uh-huh.
What I think I asked it on an earlier, I don't remember for sure, 61028 minor equipment for $13,000. What is minor equipment?
Oh, let me just tell you, I love this because I get to go look and find out what it is. In this particular case, we have some truck-mounted small cranes on some of our work trucks, and we need to replace the crane on one of the work trucks. So that's a crane replacement.
So it's one item, basically?
Well, that's most of what it is, and then there might be other minor equipment, like, for instance, they might need to buy additional weed whackers or chainsaws or things like that, so, but the big item is a crane, a truck-mounted crane, which is worn out and needs to be replaced. That budget is largely status quo from this year. Next, we have Vine Street Water Treatment Plant, pages 249 and 250. Again, this budget is pretty much unchanged from this year. No major activities or things to note other than the usual good job that they are doing. Next, we have water distribution, 251 and 252. Let's see, what can I say about this? So the capital equipment line at the bottom there, in this case is a mix of things. So it's gone up quite a bit, so I wanted to point out that we're doing some replacement flow meters. We have cathodic protection at one of our reservoirs that needs to be replaced. And then we have some SCADA equipment and things that need to be replaced. So that's the reason for the increase there.
Okay, two questions on that page. 60211 insurance bonds jumped up $63,000.
Yes. So, what I can say about that is that that's based on the way the city as a whole allocates the insurance premium costs. And there's a formula that it's partially based on your exposure, and it's partially based on the number of claims that you've had over the last 3 years, as I mentioned earlier.
Okay, just like the other one dropped, this one has gone up.
Right, so there has been an increase in claims from this program. However, what I will say is that I talked with Gina about this in particular, and we're going to work on looking at the methodology we use, because these huge increases are very difficult to manage in these programs. We try not to increase our program budgets by inordinate amounts every year, and there's not a lot we can do to control our costs to make up for a $63,000 increase in insurance. So it's difficult to keep doing what you need to do and try to make up for a $63,000 increase. So we're going to work on the methodology over the next year.
Line item 65076, contract maintenance, 2016-17 was like $97,000, and then 27-18, adjusted budget is 23.5, and it jumps back up to proposed of 73.5 for a $50,000 increase.
Yeah, so that really depends on what's happening each year. That's one of those lines that changes. So, for instance, we may have some large meters that need to be replaced. So those are very expensive items that may go up from year to year. We may have more asphalt and concrete repair that needs to be done from one year to the next. So this is based on the lookout for next year, what we think anticipate spending.
Okay, thank you.
For those activities.
Cathodic replacement, is that zinc?
Jeff, what do we use for cathodic protection? Cathodic protection at the reservoir? Magnesium anodes. Within the tanks, is what he said. Okay. Next operating budget is the Albany Millersburg Water Treatment Plant. Again, similar to Vine Street, the treatment plants are pretty steady. Next fiscal year, not a whole lot of new projects going on there, so not a lot happening. The large drop in capital equipment is because in the current fiscal year, we paid for a set of membranes out of capital equipment. And next year, we're done with membranes for at least 5 or 6 years. So that drop is there.
Is this budget paying for the airline problem and gaskets and?
That's at the wastewater treatment plant.
Oh, okay.
Water reclamation facility, but that's being paid out of the sewer capital budget. We had set up a capital project for that.
We'll be looking at recovering those funds.
I understand.
Okay, on to Jeff.
All right, water SDC budgets, pages 255, 258. Projects are as discussed through the CIP meeting, and then you also have the transfers out to debt service for the payments on the Albany Millersburg water treatment plant. Water debt service budgets are shown on pages 259 and 60. Payment schedules on 259. We have a similar situation here happening on what the SDC's obligation towards debt service payment. That's loud. But it's not as nearly as severe as on the sewer side. So it's something to be aware of. It's definitely manageable, but it's not near the degree of what we're worried about on the sewer side. Water capital budgets are on pages 261, 263. There is one surprise project in there that I want to draw your attention to. You should have already received from finance an updated budget sheet here. So I'd like you to take a look at is page 263, line 89008. And what this project is it's providing for mixing improvements in each of the 3 Valley View reservoirs. So the driver behind the improvements is really to try to protect water quality by improving mixing and reducing water age. So to get, not too technical, but just to describe to you kind of what's happening there. Got a column of water in the reservoir. Just filling your drain lines on the bottom, and that column of water just kind of floating on the top, just going up and down, up and down. So if we have a fire or something, you have a big draw of water out into the system, you have some water that's aged longer than we would like it to out for people to drink. So we want to do the mixing improvements in there before head off any type of problem that might happen down the road. We haven't had any problems yet, but we also don't want to experience any. The project there is to do mixing improvements. Water economic development budgets are on pages 264, 265. There's about $50,000 of rate money that's being directed into this budget, similar to the sewer eco-deal budget. Council policy is to transfer over up to $100,000 a year to try to maintain that $500,000 reserve. Basically wanting to have a pot of money on hand if you have a significant industry or project that comes, a commercial project that comes into town that you want to participate in, you have some funds set aside to go to. I should point out it was also envisioned for business retention, not just new businesses. North Albany Water Capital Projects, pages 266, 267. This budget is used to fund capital projects outside of the urban growth boundary in North Albany, where the city took over the county service district many years ago. So when North Albany was annexed, we took over all of the 13 different service districts or something out there that had been combined into one. We took all of that on, and the portion that there was portions of the area out there that were outside the urban growth boundary that were already served, and so we ended up inheriting that. We don't have any projects proposed in that budget this fiscal year. We are building reserves to do some larger projects in future years once we have enough money. So where that money comes from is customers outside the urban growth boundary in North Albany have an additional capital charge that they pay each month on their water utility bill. So that money goes into this budget and is basically a savings account to fund capital projects out in that area.
What's the target?
What's the
target, your total revenues?
We have, I don't know that we have a target. What we have is, we have nearly I can tell you how many customers we have, which is nearly 400. We have, the monthly capital charge is a little over $23 in addition to their normal bill. The dollar amount was originally set back in the early 2000s. We went through with Water Task Force and looked at kind of what we anticipated the needs being in the area, set a target amount, and then that capital charge has been escalated over time, just the same as all the other charges. So I don't remember where we started or what the numbers were associated with it. It's been over 10 years.
Yeah. Okay, but you were saying that you're in the savings account to be doing some major projects, and that's what I mean. What's that target amount of money before you're able to start those projects?
We had, we've probably been, I don't know, it's been 3 or 4 years since we've done projects out in this area. The next priority project that we were looking at, it's a cross-country line off of Scenic heading over towards, in the direction of like Coons Drive, going through back lots and across people's property. It's a mess. A lot of elevation change, a lot of trees. When we looked at that a couple of years ago and scoped it out, I think it was in the $1 million range. It's going to be more now. Yeah. I know we're not close, so I haven't refreshed the cost estimate.
Okay.
Jeff Kinney, did I say anything wrong there?
Negative.
All right. Yeah.
Okay, so next we have the water equipment replacement budget, which comes back to me. This year, the only equipment we're planning to replace is actually a dump trailer. So it's $5,700 we budgeted to spend on that to replace one of our small dump trailers. Otherwise, this program builds funds primarily for our rolling stock. Any questions on water before we get to stormwater? Okay. Stormwater fund begins on page 270. At least in my book, it's page 270. The total stormwater budget is $2.48 million. This budget was built with the 5% rate increase we discussed with council, which will go into effect next March 1st. Stormwater rates are expected to generate about $1.8 million of revenue next fiscal year. And there are 2 operating programs. First, we have Stormwater Operations on page 271. This is a combination of the O&M work performed by street maintenance and wastewater collections, and then some other internal service staff. This FTE number that's on the bottom of the program narrative page of 3 FTE is the collection of the street maintenance and wastewater collection partial FTEs that were sort of siphoned off for accounting purposes. So we're funding 3 FTE to do stormwater operations, but those people actually live in other programs.
Chris, a year or so ago, when we took apart, combined water, sewer, stormwater to lower the rates in one and start the process for the stormwater, there was about a 2% reduction in one, and it was offset by the stormwater. Is that ratio still kind of holding true, or are they starting to increase faster than the other? Or do we know at this point? It's not?
They're not increasing faster. That was a one-time reduction in water and sewer rates to compensate for the introduction of the stormwater rate. Now they're each functioning independently. So we evaluate stormwater rate needs separately from water and sewer.
So we've got the baseline, so they're now working independently completely.
Right.
Okay.
Question, equipment. You were talking about when we first started, that you were going to be sharing equipment with.
Right,
Yeah.
we do.
Is that looking that same way going forward?
We do use existing equipment, wastewater collections or street maintenance equipment. We haven't purchased any new equipment. The equipment replacement line here is proportionally, it's basically the amount of time we use the equipment in the other programs.
Okay.
We're saving money, so when we need to buy equipment, we have some funds available. Let's see. So the expenditures you see on the stormwater operating pages are actual expenditures that the individuals are charging back for their time and equipment. So we haven't done anything new with stormwater maintenance. We're still doing the same level of work, and they're just charging back their time, no additional personnel or equipment. The Stormwater Administration Program is set up just like the other funds on page 273 and 274. Again, we have a very small contingency here for operating budgets, and the bulk of it pays for overarching things like the overhead charges for stormwater. And then Jeff will talk about capital, which will be short.
Yeah. So Stormwater Capital, we don't have any projects proposed, so there's no funding available to fund Stormwater Capital projects. We already talked a little bit about the work that Chris and Jeff Gill and their staff have done to identify needs in the system. They're about 50% of the way through. Let's see, so I'm going to skip all of that. I should point out that there still is some pipe work that's taking place, though, out in the system when it's associated with a street project. So if we're in there rebuilding a street and the storm drain system is needing improvement, it gets done with the street project. So street funds are funding the stormwater improvements associated with those projects.
So is CARE paying for them downtown, if we do anything downtown?
There is no other funding source for stormwater capital improvements, so it
We
would
didn't
have
do
to-
anything downtown with it?
I'd have to ask Stacy how much stormwater work we did. She's away.
Is it on? I don't have a dollar figure, but the CARE funds did pay for stormwater quality planners and storm drain pipe work.
Okay.
We had to do minimal storm drain work with the project.
Thank you.
The last point I wanted to make is that unlike a lot of other communities, Albany does not yet have a stormwater SDC, so you just don't see those SDC budgets in stormwater like you see for the other utilities. We are currently working on a stormwater master plan update. Once that process is done, then the council can consider stormwater SDCs. So as soon as we're done with that, we'll be right back to council to talk through that. It's a ways down the road, but we hope to get there. Equipment replacements next.
Right, so this is just the program that gathers in those annual transfers for equipment replacement, and it's building funds when we do actually need to buy stormwater equipment. So that's it for stormwater, and then are there any questions before we move to internal services? Okay.
All right, so we have 6 internal services programs. These programs provide services across several different funds and are supported by charging those funds for their services. The first 2 are ones that I manage. First one's Public Works Admin on pages 279, 280. This is the budget that contains all of the administrative staff for the Public Works Department and the Community Development Department. And then the next one is the Engineering Services budget on pages 281 and 283. And this is the one that would provide for that additional engineering position that we're requesting. Chris has the rest of them, so if you have any questions on those 2 budgets, fire away. All right.
Okay. Next, we have Ops Admin, which is my home budget. Let's see, what did my notes say? not a whole lot is changing here, except I wanted to point out line 60101. It's going up a little over $50,000. The $50,000 of that is to participate in a pilot program for the West Coast Earthquake Early Warning System. I don't know if anyone's read the articles about that. There's a system that USGS is testing out to give advance notice of earthquakes, and we're volunteering to participate in that. So there's a $50,000. We probably won't spend that much, but it's to do some work in developing our ability to respond to earthquakes. That's really exciting. If it works out, we'll be at the front end of that technology, so it's fun. It's one fun thing. The next program is Water Quality Control Services. This program provides services across water, sewer, and stormwater. So they do things like the analytical lab is in this program. We do outreach, spill response, inspections of stormwater quality facilities, et cetera. The program is pretty steady from year to year, so not much change there.
Can you go back
Sure.
on 285? Again, I'm looking at wages and salaries and
That's me.
benefits. But am I reading this accurately, that it's like $250,000 for one person?
Yep.
Because I look back at 2015-16, and that was for two people. Just
What
curious.
number is that?
I don't even care who it is. You didn't have to volunteer. It was yourself.
It's me.
I'm just-
It's fine.
I'm just looking at numbers and trying to gain an understanding of that.
Yeah.
so.
And I don't know, I had in my notes to talk at the beginning about changes in personnel costs. I thought that this had maybe come up at the last week's meeting, which I wasn't able to attend. We're seeing in almost all of our programs between 6 and 11% increase in personnel costs, depending on a lot of different factors. And I'm sure finance and HR can tell us why that's happening, but it was higher this year than I think I've seen it in previous years. And, I think a lot of that has to do with trying to deal with PERS responsibilities and how that's divvied up amongst all of our staff. We have gotten questions from other folks about the value of the benefits as compared to wages. It's really high. But that's just the way it is for right now.
Thank you.
Hard to plan ahead for that, isn't it?
Well, yeah, a lot of people are trying to figure that one out, so I don't know what the solution is. Let's see, so I think I got through water quality control, and the next is customer service.
Yeah, I misspoke. I have one more. So this is for utility billing, pages 288 and 289. Utility billing staff manages over 19,000 accounts. And I say this every year, but Patty and her group don't often get the recognition they deserve. They're a very hardworking group that has to deal with a lot of difficult situations and a lot of difficult people. So I really sincerely appreciate the work that they do. They don't get the appreciation that they deserve. There are a couple increases in this budget that I'll note. First, you see an increase in contractual services. This is primarily driven by an increase in our meter reading contract. We had recently went out to renew that contract. It's a multi-year contract, so we have some security moving forward, but there's an adjustment that happened this go-around. And then second, there's an increase in our cost for online account management. We feel that this is actually a positive thing because it reflects an increase in people participating in that portion of our billing program. Are there any questions on the UB budget?
Yes, Jeff, on the narrative on page 288, it says maintain the dollar amount of billing write-offs of uncollectibles at less than 0.5%. I noticed that the trend is climbing. Is that a concern for workload, or what is?
Mr. Babbitt, Supervisor of Utility Billing.
I think we've budgeted 0.25 every year, but the first three are the actuals that have actually occurred. So we typically budget the .25, but then we adjust this program narrative each year for the actual.
It's still less than .5, no question. I saw .20, .22, .25. I didn't know if that was a trend that was potentially concerning that the write-offs were going to be, are climbing.
No, I think it's just an estimate, so it looks like we've come in under the estimate each of the last 3 years.
Okay, thank you.
Jeff, are we doing sort of a staffing salary comparables on your utility billing staff to make sure we are comparable with other communities? Because we do have a lot of turnover in that department.
We do, yeah, and we actually lose a lot of them internally to other admin positions that open up, so we refer to ourselves as a training ground. So, yeah, that's one of the things in the class and comp study that's taking place now. One of the things I requested when we met with the folks that are managing that is to pay particular attention to the utility billing folks.
Yeah.
I appreciate you mentioning that.
Yep, they
Well,
need that, so.
If,
Well, do you,
I was going to, mine is not a question, mine is just a comment. It's, if they react to all the incidents like ours, we had a leak pop up between the meter and where it actually went in the house, and the meter reader let us know there was a leak there, and the staff worked with us after getting the leak repaired to
an adjustment.
make an adjustment in there. So we really appreciated that, and timely and courteous. So
Great.
it was a good experience.
Thanks for that feedback.
question, if you have a lot of turnover, what do you think that is?
I think it's a difficult position
Take
to
that
have
shit.
to take that abuse that
Working
they
with the
frequently
public.
have to take operating the counter.
You talk about water and sewer.
And the pay isn't.
Yeah, so I walk by the.
Yeah, I think
For
the
that
tolerance
abuse.
to take abuse is greater when you're getting paid more.
Actually, it might be, but, I mean, basically dealing with the public almost any time. There are people who are nice, and there are people who are something in between, and then there's that little group over there at the edge that doesn't make any difference. They are the horse's patootie all the time.
When we're doing things like replacing people's sewer laterals, they're generally pretty nice to us. When we're shutting off their water because they haven't paid their bill, they're generally not very nice.
Yep, that's the thing.
We've received some of those
I
calls.
paid my bill here a month or two ago, and I don't think those ladies know me from Adam, but I said, you know, these water and sewer rates are just too low. And they just started laughing. Well, thanks, we don't get that much.
That's a good one.
Took the wind right out of their sails, huh?
That's great. Shocked their socks off.
They like you better if you sing happy birthday to them.
We're almost done.
Yep, almost, we're in the final stretch. So the last internal service program is Facilities, Maintenance, and Engineering, and it's on page 290, 291. This is the group that is critical to the success of just about every other program at operations. They are the mechanics that provide mechanical, electrical, pump maintenance services. This is our instrumentation and control, or their SCADA group, and which they do programming analysis, report writing. This is our asset management group. It's just a really critical group of people, and they do a great job. Not a whole lot is going on in this program for next year, but wanted to recognize that they do a lot of critical work for us out at operations. So that's it for internal services, and the last thing we have to do is grants. Are there any questions on internal services? Yep. Okay, so grants are on pages 292 to 294, which I have to flip to. Okay, we have two grant programs. On page 292, 293 is the FAA Annual Capital Grant. This is where we receive FAA grants to do work at the airport. As I mentioned, next year we're doing a big apron work. It's actually going to start this fiscal year and carry into next fiscal year. This is the program that receives the money from the airport capital budget as it's transferred over to provide the match. And then the other grant we have is a really small one. It's called Title 19. Title 19 grant We can be reimbursed for the cost of rides we provide to Medicare-eligible customers for non-medical rides. So if there's a Medicare customer that wants to go to the senior center, for instance, we can recover the cost of that ride through this grant. So it's a very small portion, but it goes to the paratransit program. And that is all for Public Works, and it is less than 2 hours, I would like to point out.
Good for you.
Any questions for us at all on anything we've covered?
Try and get some sleep tonight, thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
So it's going to take me a moment to get situated for community development. I don't know if you want to maybe take a minute or two to
That'd be good.
regroup?
Yeah, that'd be good, just to stand up.
That's the slide that you
Okay, we'll take a break.
Isn't it funny though?
We made that decision.
I can do it.
She's still with us ground. She's a great person. She's actually able to do the job prepared for.
Yeah.
I think she's.
I knew there were three components. In fact, I gave you that piece of paper.
What a good find.
4 or 5 months ago.
It's tough.
Yeah, so.
It's tough.
I thought the franchise fees were. I thought the 3 different places, buckets of money. I mean, it came from Jeff Blaine.
Ready when you are.
I didn't know that he was at a place.
Okay, we're ready for community development? Is that right?
I'm ready.
To the philosophy.
Yeah, 2 of them. Bill.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and start. You should have a copy of the PowerPoint presentation in front of you in case you have trouble seeing the TV screen. I'm going to try to keep us moving along pretty quickly, so if I move too quick, just yell at me and I'll stop.
What page you on then?
We have 2 divisions in the Community Development Department, Planning, which is led by Planning Manager Bob Richardson, maybe we can wave his hand back there, and Building, which is led by our building official, our new building official, Jonathan Balkema. You could raise your hand, please. And then also Matthew Ruckers, who oversees current development activities, which include building and then also some engineering division activities. Each of the division managers are responsible for putting their respective budgets together, so they will help answer questions. If you see me turn around, that's what I'm looking to try to help get details if I need. As I'm going to hopefully demonstrate through the slides here, Albany is continuing to see strong development activity. It's a really good sign that people are choosing to invest in Albany in the way that they have over the past several years. That trend is growing. But it's also difficult for our staff to keep up with that increased development activity. We're doing a very good job. You'll probably recall that we went through some significant staff reductions during the recession. We've been getting by since then through a combination of deferring some activities. We've tried to identify and take advantage of efficiencies where we can find them. We've increased staff's workloads, we've reorganized, and we've implemented a suite of different technology solutions that has probably been the most beneficial to the building division. We're really fortunate that we have a strong core group of staff that's very dedicated and committed to providing excellent service. They've really been the reason why we've been able to keep things moving the way we have over the last several years. We're not proposing to add any staff in community development this year, but as we move through the presentation, you will see that I'm proposing to change the location from which one of the positions is funded from. So I'll call that out when I go through that. Also, I think want to take an opportunity to pass on an invite that we had that really is a compliment to our division, I think. And we often don't get to hear the positive feedback, so it's nice to take an opportunity to talk about that a little bit when it happens. We had a community that's larger than Albany reach out to us. We were one of three communities that they reached out to. They wanted to have a brainstorming session or a workshop. They were looking to improve their development services that they provide both on the engineering side and on the building side. And they had reached out to different builders in the community to see builders in the state to see what communities were good examples to go talk to and learn from. And Albany was one of those three that made that list for them to go and learn more about. The feedback that we got from that community when we met with them was that one major builder in particular referenced Albany as being the best in the state. That's a real compliment to us, I think, for a lot of hard work that's went in for a number of years to try to improve our processes and the services that we provide. We made some difficult decisions with investing in technology We've got a good reputation. I'm proud of it. Staff should be proud of it. Hope to continue to improve on it. All right, so planning, we do a lot of different activities, development review, floodplain management, managed community development, block grant program, historic preservation, all the way down to doing some code enforcement activities. From a workload standpoint, among other activities for the current fiscal year, we're estimating that the planners will receive 125 land use applications. Some of those are dealt with at a staff level. Others are required to go to the planning commission or the city council or the city council. Land use applications, they can be very complex for staff to deal with. They can be very controversial, as the council is well aware, and they can also be extremely time consuming for staff to manage. We also estimate that we'll hold 120 pre-application meetings with developers. These are free meetings that are offered where a developer or property owner can come in and receive important details about what might be required for whatever development activity they are contemplating. And at those meetings, they get planning staff, building staff, someone from the fire department and public works staff to all come around the table with them and talk through what they might be up against for developing their property, both from what fees might apply, or is their concept even feasible? So we get down to some want really detailed information, some are very conceptual. We're working to try to tailor our response to what people are after. Try not to scare people away with fine details when really they're just wanting to try to test the water a little bit. That's an area we're trying to be a little more sensitive to. Planners available for consultation at a customer service counter every business day, 8 to 5. Planners rotate through that counter coverage. Sometimes a single walk-up inquiry can take more than an hour. You end up having an impromptu pre-application type meeting right at the counter just because somebody's there. Provide some statistics here. This is one thing I've done a little bit different in the presentation from past years. I'm trying to give you a little bit of statistics, both current and history, to give a little bit of a flavor of what the trends have been and also give you a little bit of a thumb on the pulse of what type of workload we might be looking at. This is all related to applications and pre-application meetings. Of course, no two applications are the same, so you have to be careful not to draw too many definitive conclusions from looking at summary information like this. The pre-application meetings are shown in blue. As I described, these meetings are for people interested in developing their property, so they can be a very good indication of what we might anticipate seeing in the coming year or years as far as potential development. The actual applications submitted are shown in red. So from the slide, you can see a pretty steady increase over the last several years for actual development activity, and it looks like that trend's going to continue. We're continue to see an uptick in the number of pre-application meetings as well. All right, so planning gets all that work done that referenced on the other side, in addition to all of those applications and pre-application meetings with just over 6 FTE. Land use reviews have to be completed within 120 days. Some of those include public hearing processes and appeals, so it sounds like a long time, but it can end up not feeling like a long time. They also work with the Planning Commission, Landmarks Advisory Commission, and the Community Development Commission, which manages the Cdbg funding. On the building side, responsible for plan review, inspections, code compliance, emergency response. Do a lot of ADA work as well. Buildings workload, they're available as well at the customer service counter, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. Building staff estimates that they'll issue close to 3,000 permits this fiscal year and conduct over 11,000 inspections, with the value of total improvements constructed at about $110 million. I'm going to show you a series of slides here for building activity. I'll just reemphasize again, these are really good for taking a big picture look. I want to not draw too many definitive conclusions from looking at this, so that's my disclaimer. This first graph shows that we've seen a steady increase in general building permit and electrical permits over the last 6 years. This is just all permits, steady increase.
Are a majority of these permits electrical permits?
They are not. No, the numbers, when we get to the details, we can look at the split on the program narratives. It has estimates of numbers of permits, or has actual details associated with it.
Thank you.
Next slide, you see we're also projecting to be up on the number of inspections as compared to the last 5 years. Every permit doesn't require the same number of inspections, so that's why you don't see the trends don't look the same between the last graph and this one. Every permit's different. This slide shows the number of new residential home starts with the current fiscal year anticipated to be the highest of the last 6. And we're also seeing the value of the average value of home constructed increasing. So in 12-13, average valuation was a little under $220,000. We're above $250,000 right now this current fiscal year. We also want to take a look at commercial activity. Longtime building staff will report we really haven't seen this high level of this is a high level commercial development for Albany. We haven't historically seen this level of development. The big difference between projects we've seen this fiscal year and the ones in the middle of this graph is the valuation, and that made a lot more sense till GAP's brought in their new school project. So what you see happening in 14, 15, and 15, 16, we had a good number of very large commercial projects that came in that drove up values that really aren't typical for us. The 3 largest that came in were Waverly Assisted Living, Lowe's, and Winco. So just to look at averages, it would look like this fiscal year, we're seeing more big projects coming in. But as I said, it's really just because of that one school project for gas. If you take that out of the mix, the average is under $500,000. This building keeps up with their work with just over 7 FTE. They complete their inspections within 24 hours of request. Residential plan reviews have to be completed within 10 business days. We're typically faster than that. And the division itself is self-supported through building permit revenue. We'll hit on that a little bit more in a moment. All right, so really no major changes in this year's budget over last, but as I alluded to at the beginning, we are proposing to change where one position is funded from. Many of you are familiar with, especially at council level, are familiar with Ann Catlin. She's worked with the City of Albany as a planner for over 19 years. And when the city became eligible for the Cdbg program funds a few years ago, Ann agreed to manage that program and take that program on. And that involved two changes. First, her position was reduced from full-time to part-time. That was something she had agreed to. And then the funding location for her position changed from the general planning budget over to the Cdbg administration budget. And that was done because a portion of the Cdbg funds that are received are eligible to be spent on administration expenses. And with no experience yet in managing the Cdbg programs, that approach made sense, except there was an unintended negative consequence of doing that. And that's what I'm hoping to address. What ended up happening was it ended up placing a burden on her position that no other employee that I'm aware of in the city has to deal with. So what's happened is, as you've heard about, personnel costs have increased for various reasons. Cdbg funding hasn't increased at that same level. It's been more stagnant. And there's a cap on how much of that fund can be spent on personnel or administration, and it's 20%. So what's happened is that Ann, each year, not knowing what money we're going to get, if any at all, but beyond that, she's been forced to decide, do I want to work less and stay within that, so we can stay within that 20%? Or do I want to drop some of my benefits, like take part of my family off of my health care coverage, so that she stays within that funded amount? And I just really don't think that's fair that we ask that of her and nobody else. And what I'm proposing to do is to move that position back to the planning budget, so that she's budgeted with all the other planners. She'll be treated just like all the other planners. She won't have to deal with that issue. And we can still use 20% of those CDBG funds to cover the administration costs. So I'll point out to you when I go through the budgets where those things are happening. We're still maximizing the amount of CDBG funds that can be spent on admin. It's unchanged. The only change is that the planning budget is covering any gap that exists between the admin funds and other things. And Ann is doing other activities besides, other planning activities besides just CDBG activities. So it's fair. I think it's fair. I think it makes sense. That's what I'm proposing.
Question.
Yes, sir.
You said she was doing other things. When we add the money, she's doing enough of whatever that is to cover what the other part that we would be paying.
That's correct.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yep.
And it will be changing back to a full-time FTE, or is still in part-time?
Ann would very much like it to go back to a full-time FTE. There's things we are not doing that we could be doing. I did not make that ask in the budget. If there is work to be done, if that's something that the body would like to propose, we would run with it and get more work done. But the money has to come from somewhere. That's the problem. So you'd have to take it from another general fund activity, and so you'd have to figure out what you're going to cut.
Yeah, Ann's great with long-range planning. She's got the most experience really in the city, and also with her housing needs, so she's very well adverse in that, so she's valuable.
I agree. All right, so let's take a look at the details. Oh, no, I'm not there, sorry. All right, so total budget's just over $5 million. Planning budget's approaching $2 million. Building is a little over $3 million. We'll note that we recently learned that we're going to receive a little bit more in Cdbg funding than when we originally put together our budgets. You should have received those updated budget sheets to put into your binders. We get about an additional little over $10,000 for administration, and we get another around $50,000 for projects. So that should be reflected in all.
Is that handout stuff we got?
I'd have to ask finance when they provided that.
Yes.
Those sheets were provided at the end of the last meeting.
Yeah.
For those of you that were here, for those of you who weren't, you will
Yeah, we got a whole pile of that stuff. I don't suppose there's page numbers on it, is there?
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Down at the bottom.
What are they?
5,100.
23, 184.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a quick question.
Yes.
You said that, Ann, is it? You can use 20% of the funds towards administrative fees, right?
20% of the CDBG funds that we receive can be spent on administration.
Okay. And am I reading it on one of the slides here that is $660,000? So 20% of that is $132,000 for a part-time employee?
Let's look at that. Give me just a second, let me find the right numbers for you.
I think the complete award for the CDBG was $4.25, because they sent me a letter on it.
So we have, the total cost for that position as it is, wages, benefits, all that type of stuff, is just over $100,000. The difference between the position and what we anticipate being able to allocate from the CDBG funds, there's a difference of just a little over $22,000. Does that get after what you're looking for? Yep. All right. All right, so our first budget is the planning budget on pages 176 and 177, and what we just talked about is what I wanted to highlight on that budget. We're really not proposing anything different in this budget. The contractual services work that's taking place there is to get, the majority of that is code amendments, working on code audit projects as a result of our code audit that was completed.
Is this the area where a few years back we invested in software to be able to take paper plan documents, put them in PDF form and make them available to everybody at all times?
Yeah. All the departments that utilize or that conduct that type of work contributed towards that project. The project itself was really led by the building division. So it was led by the community development department, but heavily on the building side. Everybody else just kind of rode their coattails.
And how much of an efficiency gain did you see?
Well, I can share with you some real numbers, and then I can give you opinion.
That would be good.
So approximately 65% of the plan submittals and inspection requests that we're getting now are being done utilizing our new technology. Last year it was 50%. So steady increase in utilization of that program. And I can say without question that that decision to invest in that technology is the reason why we haven't had to add back a bunch of staff as we've climbed out of the recession, and you see those increases in workload on the graphs that I showed you. We're more efficient. We're able to handle things in a different way. It's more cost efficient for the city, and it's better service to the development community. It's really a win-win.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right, so the building budgets are on pages 178 through 182. State mandates that electrical be separate from the rest of the building program, and you'll see that on these pages. There really is not anything abnormal happening in the building budgets. We have held costs where we can control them. The line item increases are for things that are outside of our control, such as all the things we've been talking about for the other budgets. The real bright spot here is we talk about trying to rebuild reserves across the city. I think building is a real bright spot. We went from having to take $300,000 of general fund money in order to keep the doors open during the recession to building our reserves back up to pre-recession levels. So at the end of this budget, we're projecting to be back up to $1.5 million in reserves.
Okay, Jeff?
Yes, sir.
On your narrative on page 178, when we showed us on the slides, that the trending is going up for the number of inspections, et cetera, but from the 2017-18 to 2018-19, for permits, for total and everything else, you're showing a reduction in your estimate, but then you're showing a hefty increase on the construction value. So I'm trying to, how are you coming up with a anticipated less number of permits?
Without flipping to it here, we're usually conservative in the estimates, and I think one of those numbers might have been updated through time and the other one might not have.
Okay.
It doesn't influence the numbers.
Okay.
Last item I want to mention on the building budget is the $60,000 transfer out to police code enforcement. Should be, have it open, but it should be the last item on the building budget. Now, this is the third year of a 5-year plan to pay back the general fund, that $300,000 that would be to the building division. Wasn't structured as a loan, but when Gary and I looked at it, when we started getting revenues coming back in the door, we wanted to be bailed out again in the future, and we probably, if we ever needed it, we figured the best way to do that was probably to pay back who gave us the money the first time it happened. And so timing was right in that we had a need for a different way of looking at code enforcement across the city, really. And so we put our heads together, Chief Latanzio, myself, Kate Portia at the time, and developed a plan to change code enforcement and basically fund Christian Dell's position for 5 years from a mix of paying back through the building division and then utilizing some CARA funds. And I think Chris's work has been phenomenal, and success speaks for itself there. So we have 2 more years of doing that, and then we won't be able to continue that anymore because it wouldn't be a legal expenditure of building funds. So that's something that the city will need to wrestle with in the coming years is how we're going to fund that position, assuming that we want to continue with the success that it's brought to date. All right, so that's what I have on the building budget. Any questions there before I move on to grants? All right, so we have 2 grant programs for community development. Community Development Block Grant, or Cdbg, and the State Historic Preservation Grant. Cdbg budgets are shown on pages 184 and 185. Because the city's population is greater than 50,000, now we're considered what's called an entitlement community, which allows the city to receive annual Cdbg funding allocations through the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, as you probably more commonly hear them. We already talked about how 20% of the funds can be spent on admin. The rest of it goes to projects and programs that benefit Albany's low and moderate income residents, homeless, seniors, and other special needs residents. We have separate funds created for each of these activities because of limitations on how much can be spent on admin. So we have an admin budget, and we have an activity budget. The challenge that we have, or the obligation that we have, is probably a better word to use, is that we need to spend at least 50% of the funds that are allocated to us for each year in that year, or we risk losing future allocation. So it's really important that we carefully track all of our expenditures so we can make that reporting. Yes, Bob?
I'm looking at the volatility of the page 185, line 42046. Not quite sure. I mean, that's quite a decrease, but there was quite an increase the year before. So I'm not sure I totally understand that piece.
Great segue. Leading me into my next bullet. It's perfect. What happens with Cdbg fund, I'm assuming it's the revenue lines that you're looking at.
Yes.
So what happens is let's say we're have spent 50% every year, so that means we're not spending 100% every year. And so in some years, we're spending more than 100% of what we're allocated for that given year because we're spending previous year's money.
Right.
And so that number is going up and down, both on revenues and expenses, based on whether we have a really busy year with projects, or it's a year where we're saving some funds to do a bigger project the next year, or if in the case of whatever it was, Sunrise Park, I think it was with the wetland permitting, that was like delay, to finally get a project to do. So that's why you see those peaks and valleys.
Okay. Thank you.
The other thing I want to point out is on page 184, you'll see the line item for planning services at $79,800. That's where that reimbursement for Ann's time comes in. So the planning budget is a general fund budget. So this money comes out of the Cdbg fund and goes back into planning. So unlike the internal services funds that we have for public works, where you can see the expenditure and you can see the revenue in another budget, this revenue goes into a general fund budget, which the finance staff would have to tell you where that is, because I have no idea. I know it's not in my budget anymore. No, it is.
There's a separate line in the general fund revenue for that reimbursement.
Oh, it's
So
a designated one?
it's a designated.
Okay, so there's, you can see it as a designated revenue. Last grant is for historic preservation. It's on page 186. This money comes through State Historic Preservation Office, or SHPO. It's typically used for residential rehabilitation grants on registered historic homes and several activities for public outreach and support of the Landmarks Advisory Commission. The state requires us to provide a 50% match on these grant funds. We meet that match with staff time, so we don't have to put any cash out. That's a nice feature. If we don't spend the money, it goes back to the state, so we like to spend the money. We primarily use the fund for rehabilitation grants, design assistance, and promoting Historic Preservation Month. It's really not a large sum of money that we're dealing with. Try to stretch it as far as we can, get as much benefit out of that money as we can. That is the end of what I have on the detailed budgets, unless you all have additional questions for me.
Any questions? Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Are we ready for the resolution with the changes?
I'm not.
You're not?
No, I'd like to make some comments and questions first.
Okay.
Before you call for a resolution, if I
Okay,
could.
go ahead.
I had a quick question for Peter. At the beginning of our presentations, you talked about a priority, a goal of replenishing our reserves to the extent possible. As a result of this budget, do you have an idea of what percentage you'd be increasing our reserves, or what dollar amount you'd be replacing our reserves? And I would assume that that has to do with our ability to get favorable ratings on bonds and so forth?
Certainly has to do with bond ratings, but it also has to do with being able to weather the next recession.
Sure.
And I would ask Gina to chime in here, or Ann, but our reserves stand right now at about 5.5%? That's the figure that she and I have been talking about. Now, can you repose your question? Are you asking where we would like to go, where I wanted to go, or where we would like to go next year?
As a result of this fiscal budget that we're talking about tonight,
Right.
where were we and where do you hope to be as a result of implementing this budget?
Right.
One of the goals was to increase our reserves.
Correct.
Are we able to do that, and if so?
No, the
okay.
short answer is not
Okay.
nearly as much as I had hoped to do.
Okay.
Because, and so you remember that, I think you alluded to the three priorities that I put
Yep.
forward: to maintain service levels, to make adjustments organizationally backed up by a good business case, and to build reserves. So we've been able to maintain service levels, certainly. We've made a few few organizational changes based on sound returns on investment, but I have not been able to build the reserves as much as I would have liked.
Very good. So I basically had a comment then, before the call question, unless anybody else has something. I want to reiterate something earlier that was stated. I believe that staff in the city of Albany is doing a phenomenal job. In my humble opinion, there is no question as to the services that are delivered in this community, and that we truly are an outstanding community as a result of our staff. So I applaud them. So I want everyone to understand, there is no question on the services. From my point of view, I go for that with a really tough question, and I don't know how the rest of the non-council members feel, but I really struggle with my participation in this committee, and wondering what value I bring to the table and what I get to do. I think it's wonderful to sit through these presentations and to hear the great work, and then we call for a question and we vote. But I worry about the tough work that needs to be done. I worry about all the things that are before us, and I really don't want to wait until the biennial budget that we would have to do next year, so that the following year we might be able to do some of this tough work. So that puts everything off for another 2 years, if that were the plan. And so when I look at this, I struggle. People in the community come to me, and I struggle with the concept. And there's an age-old adage that says ignorance is bliss. And before I got involved with the budget committee, before I got involved with this process, I was very ignorant about what our community did and how we did. Our processes and our services, and I appreciate that I know more. And I think that ignorance is just ignorance. But now that I know about what's going on, what is my fiduciary responsibility to this community to listen to something, to hear, and actually make a recommendation to do something about it. And so I really believe that when I look at this and all the different things that we aren't funding, I know that there's at least $50 million worth of come to balance type activities, not even getting an estimate for residential street maintenance and stormwater, but just adding fire, police, facility, deferred maintenance, IT equipment, park master plan, and street maintenance. Then I look at that there's at least another 7 to 10 million per year that's going unfunded. So I will look at all those things and say, okay, as a member of the budget committee, what would a budget committee member recommend, not being a council member? And we've heard from, most recently, both Chris and Blaine tonight, that we do really good planning. Okay, so I agree with that. We have some phenomenal plans with the CIP and with what all the departments are doing. I don't think we do very good with budgeting the money to be able to fix the plan and to identify what to do. I know in my life, I have found that when things go wrong, it's because of a lack of communication. And as a community member, I think that maybe a lot of our community doesn't know what the liability before the city is. They love the services, but they're ignorant of how much it would actually take to fix streets, how much it would actually take in the way of increased revenue so we could address all these issues. And so I look at that, and this comment is for the city council, not for the budget committee. If we take a stance and we say, city council, you need to come up with a plan and you need to direct, as the policy makers, you need to direct staff to take action and to come up with a long-range plan of how to address these issues. Kicking the can down the street and waiting for another council to come in and do something isn't the right way to do it. There has to be hard work that's going to be done. There are going to be some very difficult decisions. I think the community's not going to be happy with it, but in the long run, I think they'll be happier because the right thing was done than the individual decision of whether or not we have to increase the tax or come up with another bond or levy proposal or whatever it is. So I think the council really needs to set goals, identify parameters, the funds that would be needed, the estimates, and timelines, and that needs to be directed towards staff to say, these are the parameters that I would like you to start addressing and planning going forward. And then from there, I think as the city manager and as the staff, you'd be able to take that direction and that policy on behalf of the council and say, we will work with that. And we will identify and say, you know what? We've come up with a number and it's 50.5 million. And you know, we can't do a darn thing about it today. But here's the steps we would if we could. And at least a community, they're going to say, you know what? They've thought about it, they've planned it, they've identified it, and they're doing their best to communicate it. But to go down and just say, we don't know and we're not going to do anything about it, we're just going to push it down to another year, I don't think is responsible. And as a member of the budget community, the budget committee, I think our community looks to each one of us, not city council members, but looks to each of us and say, you know what, you signed your name on this, and I trusted you. I trusted you to make good decisions on behalf of our community and to represent us at a different level than what the council is representing. And so with the small amount of opportunity that we have to hear and to critique, this is our only chance to be able to say and do something. We don't have any power other than a voice. We can't enact anything, we can't do anything, we can just voice our opinion. And I think that's our responsibility as budget committee members to say, we need to do something, we can't continue to put it off. And 2 years from now, in my opinion, is too long. So I would hope that the city council would take and have those tough discussions going forward and work with you and the members of staff to come up with a plan starting as early as next year, or at least explore the ideas and communicate.
Well, you know, you say come up with a plan, and I would say that if if the funds, in a perfect world, in an unconstrained world, if the funds were there to fund street maintenance, just as one of the components of the many things that the city does, I'm fairly certain that the Public Works folks have prioritized and have figured out what needs to be done and have put things in order, and when those funds would be available, they could pursue those projects. The bottom line is the funds are not available. So they have to take the priorities that they've made or that the council provides them and fund what they have. If the funding was available, there is a plan to accomplish what needs to be done.
And that's exactly what I'm saying, is that the council needs to come up with a way to say, how is the funding going to become available? And I'm not saying cutting services, I'm saying look at other opportunities, looking at grants, looking at whether or not we need to have taxes, look at all of the options and say, how do we fix the problem? Because if we identify just streets, the streets aren't going to fix themselves, and they're not going to get any better. They're only going to get worse. And I've seen the presentation on streets where the longer you wait, the more exponential the cost is to be able to repair it. And I know things are going to get worse, and there's no fix in sight. And that's a policy decision for the council and the mayor, not for the budget committee. So that's my comment.
Any other questions?
So the only thing I would still like, so Peter, I know, to me, it looks like a Parks Ranger position would really be valuable, to be able to have somebody there dedicated to all of our natural areas and all of our parks. And I kind of look at it, it would lessen the burden on our Parks Department for having to be out there, and if it can reduce the amount of damage and cleanup. Also, our Public Works Department on reducing the damage that they do see along our natural areas. I know it was a chunk for the first year. I think it was 140, and then the next year would be 90. I know we have the money in contingency. I don't know if, a lot of times I've always seen over the years, we do a lot of cost savings and really watch the budget during the year, and so our contingency usually doesn't fall lower. It's up to, what does the rest of the budget committee feel? Do you think that would be a valuable addition to have a Parks Ranger position, to be able to lessen the burden off of Parks Department also, and Public Works, and our community's quality of life? So I know it's an added piece in the budget, but did you want to respond, Peter, on your thoughts?
Well, when we opened up this process this year, I mentioned that this budget will work this year. But I haven't been able to, as I just answered Scott, been able to plus reserves up the way I'd hoped to do that, which really, it's a cliche now, kicking the can down the road, but really, here it is again. The hard decisions are really, Gina and I talk almost daily about upcoming difficult decisions. And as you've seen, one of the drivers here is, revenues certainly are increasing, but one of the drivers is the cost of personnel is going up faster, the cost of operations are going up faster than the revenues are going up. So to add another person would, certainly that's, if the council desires that, that's certainly something doable. And I thought Chief Latanzio's presentation was very compelling. It would be a great thing to have. It just comes back to that being one of those difficult decisions. I don't know that we can afford that right now unless we identified an offset somewhere else in the budget. The only other option would be to take more out of reserves, which again would be going backwards. Or unless there was some other place that we could identify that source of funding.
And I think we identified several places in the budget where it would be great if we could have a person or a full-time person, as Jeff just said, to help in the planning process. But as he said, if we put the money there to make the part-time person full-time, we got to take it from somebody else. Who do we take it from, and what are we going to cut? And from what I was seeing on this budget, it's, unless you want to start taking it out of reserves again, which I don't think is a wise idea, it'd be really hard to implement another person into the current budget.
Well, the one thing we didn't touch base on, though, was with planning department, does have the opportunity to raise planning fees. So then it isn't, property taxes, basically, general fund subsidizing those planning fees. So there is that option. I'm just trying to look at more lessening the burden, too, on our Parks Department and all the cleanup, and trying to be able to, maintain every bit of the cleanup that it takes in the Parks Department is taken away from other parks maintenance. And this isn't just Albany, it's a rising problem throughout the state with cleaning up, all public spaces. I don't think the problem's gonna go away. I think if we don't stay really on top of it, more proactive, we're gonna have more of a burden on those cleanup costs. So, unless it's something that we look at, if the Budget Committee's okay with the council looking at it when we get our property tax revenues that come in, that we find out by November, if we do have a big uptick, maybe it's something that the board adding that position, but.
I would also ask that you give us a chance to gauge the effectiveness of the recent prohibition against camping in public spaces and see just exactly how much that might have helped our parks personnel.
Go ahead.
Deck chairs Titanic. If you're looking forward, we have an economic problem. Money coming in goes one way, money going out goes the other. Now, kicking the can down the road is still kicking the can down the road. You want to have something else? Decide where you want to take it from. I mean, the problem is, we don't know. I mean, it's what's the most important thing and what's the least important thing. Jeff knows around what he does, Ed knows, et cetera, et cetera. We don't know. And until we know, you can't make a informed decision. Now, I also want to reiterate, like Scott did, I don't have a problem with what staff has given us here. Staff gave us what we asked them to give us. And that is all about keeping the same thing we've got now, the way we've got it. You're either going to fix it or not. You fix it in the coming months or you fix it in the coming years, the further away you push that problem, the bigger the problem becomes. Now, I can't really support the budget the way it is. It's not that people haven't done a good job in giving me numbers. It's that for 5 years, I've been saying I would like to have a delineation of what the importance is. And each time, First Council said, well, no, that's too much work. And I understand staff doesn't want to do it because it's too much work. But the bottom line is, if you don't know what the most important thing is, you don't know where to move things. And until there is pressure, I mean, there was pressure on staff during the recession to cut back, and everybody worked harder. And then to get out of that, we used technology. I don't know if we can do that with other things or not, but the bottom line is, technology got us, what, 3 or 4 positions anyway? Or more? I mean, and we're doing the same thing with police, before very long, they're not going to have to, type out the same form 4 times on a call. Thinking outside the box is what needs to happen, and bureaucracies don't want to think outside the box. Because, well, if you do, that's not the safe space. The safe space is the way we've always done it.
It's kind of meaning towards staff.
It's not mean at all.
It's not, I didn't
No,
say, I
I-
said demeaning.
No, it is not.
I think just so that you all know, I mean, the staff does do work like that, prioritization with internally all the time, and they do think out of the box and create different ways and innovative ways of doing things. I think the problem is that you're faced with, we're not, we like to be a flexible and agile organization that can respond, but we're a government organization, so because of that, you as the council as a deliberative body representing the public that you represent with very different opinions and your own different priorities, you provide us guidance through the strategic plan. You agree on those priorities, and then you expect your city manager and your department directors then to come up with how to make progress towards those goals. And they do that. We can't, as in some industries, you can shift product lines on the spot and stop making something and start making something else. In the city government, that's not really doable. You can provide priorities to us that are more important than the other. And people often talk about public safety, so I think you can see that public safety is a priority, and I think that in the city you have in the past emphasized that. Does that mean that other priorities are not priorities? And how I challenge, in my own mind, I challenge myself, how do you show those priorities? How do you say that one is more important than the other? And it usually comes down to a political decision.
Well, Peter, it is a political decision. And that's why it's important for the political people to have the information. We don't have Ed's list that this is the best thing and that's the, I can't live without these things, I could live without that stuff. The problem is, we don't have it for anybody. So when the time comes, what is more important? Ed's number 7 thing on the list or Mario's 9th thing on the list? If you don't know what those are, you don't know how to make that choice. And it's 7 people talking about it and trying to listen to staff and have them tell us this is where the problem is, and making the tough decision.
Well, that's correct, but on the face of it, I would say that, you pay the department directors to make difficult decisions. So those priorities that Ed has delineated, he has acted on them, as you should rightfully expect him to do so. And by the time it comes to you, it's reflecting his best assessment of how you can make progress in the parks and recreation world towards accomplishing the city's goals, which is why, as Councilor Sykes said earlier, it's like a battleship trying to turn, because it doesn't respond that quickly. You would change your priorities and you communicate that to the staff, then we start making decisions that support that.
Well,
Go ahead.
2 points. One, back to Scott, and you brought up the road infrastructure issue. It's not like this has been a surprise. We've been talking about this for a year and a half and working through what the causes have been, what the options are that we have, and trying to figure out what a solution might be and how do we make that happen. And some of it's starting to come together now. But to what Rich is saying, I pretty strongly disagree in that what we're getting into sounds to me like micromanaging what Peter does based on our policy choices. We're not here to make line item choices for the departments. And I still think, and go back to what I believe is where we need to be making our decisions and trying to get more in-depth with would be looking at the strategic plan, because that is planning out 5 years by department. This is where we think the goals go, and if we can agree that those are the priorities, now the highly paid staff gets to manage that budget and drive the dollars down to the balance. And then I don't want to sit there and micromanage and pick apart. I think that priority is higher than this one over here. I don't believe that's our job in any way, shape, or form.
Go ahead.
I'd like, at this point, I'd like to make the motion to approve the resolution that's on the dais. I think it's been amended.
Well,
Yes, the amended resolution.
Approve the resolution as amended.
As amended.
let me make it, okay?
Okay.
To approve the budget with the changes that have been
Yes.
outlined. And
And there needs to be a second.
I guess if we're ready to vote,
Well, no, not yet. So I'll go ahead and second, and then it'd be discussion.
okay,
Let's get closer.
You'd ask for discussion.
you seconded?
Yeah.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Colleen, would you just ask everybody for discussion on the motion? Yeah.
To what?
Ask if there's any discussion on the motion.
Oh, is there
Yeah.
any discussion before? Okay.
Okay.
Bill?
So getting back to the park ranger that Sharon was talking about, I'm not going to commit to it. I think Peter's right. But I think Sharon's got a good point that if there was some way to quantify the value of that individual, as an example, Sharon said Public Works spends money picking up trash, Parks does the same thing as well as maybe repairing things and so forth. The program might just pay for itself, but the funding source would be interesting if indeed it did save Parks and Public Works money. I could see where they might contribute to funding of that position, as well as, the police department may be realizing some savings. If you ask Parks and if you ask Public Works, they'd probably say, yeah, I'd rather fund a portion of that individual than pay my people to pick up all this stuff. I've got better things for my people to do around town. So how do you quantify it? You could do it on a one-time basis, and monitor it for a year and see if indeed there is some savings. Maybe you do it for a half a year. Maybe it might be interesting for the next budget cycle to have some input from Parks and from Public Works. You're out there on the battle lines, you're seeing what's going on. In theory, could this be stopped or controlled with a park ranger? And what do you think some potential savings might be? Just to see if there is some validity in the idea of some 2 or 3 departments funding that position. Because it's clearly, in my opinion, not just a police issue.
It's a pilot project.
Right. So, this may not be the time for the pilot project, as Ray was just saying, but I just want to throw that idea out and maybe get some feedback next year, or they build it into the budget next year or something.
Certainly. May I point out, too, that before you move on to a resolution, or if you want, we're equipped to answer some of the questions that you talked about putting into a parking lot. Okay, some of the leftover questions. So if you want to go there, we can certainly do that. But you're on your discussion right now.
Good, let's do it.
Are you ready to vote?
No,
Colleen?
no.
Colleen?
City manager wants to talk about it,
Oh, I'm sorry.
about these questions.
Colleen, can I ask a question? I mean, I think, and I don't know which meeting it was, but we talked about a grant writer. Because there's funds out there, that maybe we could get to help us. But also, I mean, I don't know what kind of a land inventory the city has that's just sitting there, not paying getting any taxes or anything like that. And I know, Ed, I'm sorry that I'm saying this, but, we paid, how many million for the East Thornton Lake Park area? What's that doing for us? The tax increment that could have been received from a development there would have helped. And so I'm thinking that if we take a land inventory, maybe there's some that we can sell, the grant writer, that type of thing. And also, even when I work for the county, they always say, the commissioners say, well, we don't want to cut services, that would just hurt everything. Well, you know what? People are not going to understand that there's no money unless it affects them. If we continue, when we went into the recession and all the employees had to do more with less people, the public had no idea. They were getting everything, and every employee had to work double time. And I just think that that's, so sometimes it may be that we have to decide, do we need to do all the programs that we provide from the senior center, from the park service, from, all different things? Do we need to fund them, or can a private entity do that? You've got a lot of places out there that do the same type of classes, exercise classes, this type of thing, so I think there's some things that we can look at, but by not letting the public realize how tough it is to come up with money, and no, we don't have any money. Streets, they complain all the time. Well, guess what?
In the budget.
Yeah, so, anyway, I just think that the grant writer and some land inventory and stuff, maybe we need to sell some stuff. That's all.
Ready for?
I say amen.
Go ahead and start with the parking lot questions, and just what we gathered through the past couple meetings. We didn't put any questions for today. These were already set up, and there's some sharing of information and also some comments. I just wanted to make sure that everybody heard the same thing that we were jotting down and trying to answer. So there was areas that generate some questions. Basically, APD had some information sharing there. AFD, there was a question that Councilor Kellum asked. There was questions on council and non-departmental in terms of benefits, and there was some benefit questions that came as well throughout the past 2 meetings. From the fire department, this is actually the police department. There was some concerns in terms of central service, how we are allocating central service charges, and staff will be looking into the allocation of central service charges once we get into the munis system upgrade. It's the plan to revisit that process and to determine how we best allocate these charges based on the new system. So that's the plan for that allocation review. So we can bring it back next time.
I was just going to say that, as you noted last time, that's an old spreadsheet that's used to come up with those charges. So it's time that it be reviewed. It'll be an interdepartmental team. It won't just be central services folks that look at those charges. And the formula is used to derive the charges. And we've got to come up with a fair and transparent charge. So that's what their charge will be, no pun intended.
The next section was the fire department, and I know that John provided some information on a call, and there was a question that Councilor Kellum asked in terms of whether ambulance current charges are covering the cost. And all that, there was an explanation that John provided, but I would ask John to provide that if he has a microphone.
Yeah, there we go. It's a difficult question, and I'm not sure how well I answered it the other day. We've talked quite a bit about that since that meeting. How do we determine what the true cost is for providing ambulance services? Departments throughout the state wrestle with that question, especially departments that are integrated fire and EMS together, because there's so many overlapping duties that occur with your firefighters who are also dual role cross-trained to be the paramedics, and the equipment that gets used on the ambulance versus used around the station house. Probably the best answer I can give at this point in time is that I know there's other departments, one other department in the state specifically that actually hired a consultant. They paid in the $10,000 to $20,000 range to have them come in and determine exactly how much that was to help them with setting what their ambulance rate was and what they charge. So it's not an exercise we've done. It's not an easy exercise to do just because of all the crossover between the fire side and the ambulance side, since everybody's dual role and cross-trained. But it's something that we do look at and we're paying some attention to.
Thank you, John. The next question came from Mayor Canopa, asked, how often does the fire department use the fire prop? I know that Assistant Chief Wooten shared that every firefighter goes through this at least once a year. And also John provided to me that the new recruits actually spend 1 week of their training and going through the fire prop. Also, John shared about the cost of the new tower, and there's a cost of between $500,000 and $1 million. This is a training tower that was removed from Station 11, and there is no plan at this time to rebuild that tower. There's no funds to move forward with that.
And Chris addressed that peripherally while you were out in terms of the cost maintenance.
Sheriff Holden asked, which line item does the conflagration revenues come into? And Gina provided the information that these funds do not go into the fire department line item. They go directly into the revenue, into the general fund. There's no line item there on the AFD programs that have these revenues coming in. It's just general fund and then it comes back to them. John also provided some information in terms of equipment replacement contribution, and that the overall contribution is about $60,000 into equipment, which is less than in prior years. And he also mentioned that in order to fund the equipment replacement for fire, it'll be $2.5 million, and an ongoing funding requirement of about $250,000. Economic development, the question was related to workforce development funding and the status of an expected reimbursement. Councilor Kellum and staff, and also David Becker from LBCC went through an exercise of identifying some of the reimbursement that had taken place. And through that process, there were some questions asked, and there was some funding that went above what was authorized in the range of about a $40,000 cost. And I actually follow up with David and Becker, and he's going to be identifying in the spreadsheet which items he's going to be removing, and he's going to bring it back in, I believe, the June meeting, as well as some changes that he, with the business partners, have identified, that given that we approved this a few years back, there's new technology that they have identified, and they want to update the list to match that new technology. So he's going to come back and identify some of the items in that list with his business partners that are supporting him to make sure that we're buying and leveraging those dollars the best they can.
They've already used the wrong equipment. I mean, what they had on their list, for those who didn't know, were individual pieces of machinery, only they wanted to get them that were combined. Well, they cost about $1,000 more each when you do that. Plus, when you do that and something goes wrong, the whole thing's gone. You can't just put a component on it. And that was part of the issues that they had.
So we'll come back to council and share those changes and where we're taking out the reimbursement from the other sections. In terms of finance, what's included in the miscellaneous revenue line item? So Gina provided here some information. There's multiple things that come into that miscellaneous revenue, which includes APD, record fees, photocopies, holiday food fare, employee paid beverages and donations. So there's a lot of different items that come into this revenue line item. The next question is medical permits versus recreational marijuana, and only medical marijuana facilities require a permit. Recreational are treated as any other business, and there's no permit for them to conduct business in the city. Council and non-departmental, we have the question of why is there $2,000 in employee paid benefits. Basically, this line item is to cover Social Security, workers' comp, and Medicare. This year, we're expecting the expense to be around $1,200. And next year, we're planning to budget closer to that, so it'll be a few $100 less.
And that's it. So thank you for all the work you put into this. It's a late night again, and at this point, I would just make the request that the Budget Committee approve the 2018-19 budget and forward to council for adoption.
Okay, are you ready to vote now? Okay, on the resolution with the changes, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Do we have any objecting?
Aye.
We have to take a roll call.
Sykes?
No.
Vernig? Pearson?
Yes.
Keller? Keller?
Me?
It's you, Rich.
Yeah.
No, she said Keller.
Yes.
I'm sorry, was that a yes? Yes, okay, thank you. Canopa?
Yes.
Folden's not here. Olson?
Yes.
Summers?
Yes.
Kellum?
No.
Langyar?
No.
Kopsinski?
Yes.
Coburn?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Thompson?
Yes.
Nine to three. Okay, now what's next?
So did it pass?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any other business? Okay, I think we're
Thank you,
done.
everyone, for 3 great days of